instructions on a table whenever you're under the gun like that, so it'd be better to do it ahead of time, but you just have to mentally force yourself to think about studying the table, because it's just not, it's not normal. But it'll help, I promise. Yesterday I told y'all to use the front of the book because it's got a table of contents, and so I've got a little own device here. Alright, yeah, it's on page 21, right in front of 2021. There are 4 questions there. If you haven't already answered them, go ahead and take a quick few minutes while we get set up. And that first one, believe it or not, they stole from me. They're almost line for line in the master's test. I'm wondering if I can sue them for stealing material.
You can try and repeat it, so.
And they'd be like, well, how do you know it's on the test? It's just my license number. I should have said that out loud, no. I'll give you guys 3, 6, 9, to give you about 10 minutes here to finish all 4 of those. If you've already finished them, just if you've already finished them, you can take a shot at this one if you like. It's up here on the board. I'll work it real fast whenever we get back. Masters in here taking a test like the last 6 months. Masters. 1. Anybody else? No. Do you remember seeing any question about some fluorescent lamps, like 1,000 fluorescent lights? Like that, asking for like the kilowatt hour or the cost for it, or the ballast factor? 5 more minutes.
porque van a subir por abajo y no vas a subir con la tienes que hacer uno bien y tiene que ser la dos y medio, dos, tres, y no te vas a subir a la
Thank you. And I think that's what, no, I used the squiggly one. All right, so that's 12 minutes. You know, when you're under a little bit of a pressure of time, it definitely puts some more stress on you, I think, doesn't it? So what did you guys get for question number 1?
4.
What? Where'd you go up with that? Anybody get 19.12? Yeah? Reckon why there's 2 19.12s?
I got 20.
20? So we've got, what's the demand load for 5 dryers with a nameplate rating of 4,500 watts each, installed in residential dwelling application, and feed from a nominal voltage of 240 volt. All right, so really the thing that matters here is the dryers and the nameplate rating there. So you're looking at the table that's 220.54, right? It's up on the top right-hand corner, page 77, is it? Yeah, page 77. I want you to put minimum 5,000 watts across the top of that table. And then I want you to take a highlighter and highlight what you just wrote on that table, so you don't ever try to use a value less than 5,000 watts with that table. In other words, in this case, the nameplate rating, which is 4,500 watts, is not enough to cut it, right? If you look at the article that has the same number on it, which is just, I think, over on the left-hand column there, the bottom, there's a rule there that's explained that with that table, if you're gonna use the table to derate or take any kind of diversity factor, you have to use at least 5,000 watts or the nameplate, whichever is greater. So it could have been, they could have given us 5,500 watts, right? And that would have been fine. Then we would use 5 times 5,500 instead of 4,500 or 5,000. But either rate, you're gonna have to bump that 4,500 and send that question to 5,000, so it'd be 25,000 times the derating for the row 5, which I think is 85%, is it?
Yeah.
Notice that the first 1 through 4 are 100%, so basically you don't get to take any diversity factor until you hit that 5th one, but when you hit the 5th one. So 21.250 or 21.25 kVA would be the correct answer there. By the way, the kVA and the kW are the same thing. For the purpose of this test, I mean, in the real world, there is a difference between true power and apparent power, but with this exam, they consider them to be the same value, so you don't have to worry about which one of those is right. Now, typically, we use a watt to describe the connected load or the appliance or the nameplate rating. We use a VA after it's been converted to a demand load, and that's usually the convention that we use to kind of describe what the difference between a number is. The demand load would be expressed in VA, the appliance rating would be expressed in watts. All right, so since we're on this table, let's look at a couple more examples real fast, just because I want to make sure that I give you what I know about it. I'm aware of about 3 different questions. One of them has 10 dryers. One of them has 23 or somewhere in that area, or maybe 25, I don't know, somewhere in that area. And then one's got 41 dryers. So I'm just gonna do, we're gonna do 10 dryers. We'll do, let's see here, 10 dryers. Say it's like 31 or it's 23 or something. It's right in here, so 23. So 23. And then the next one was 41. So these are 3 separate questions, right? The thing about dryers that you might also need to know that's not listed there on the table that you might want to put a note. Derating neutral at 70%, and I would just write that underneath the table. That way you don't have to worry about where I got it from. Just trust me, 70%, and I'll say where I got it from. But neutral or the grounded conductor for dryers derate at 70% after you've applied this table, right? So it'd be done after as a second step. Because occasionally they'll be asking you for multiple dryers, but they'll ask you what the demand on the grounded conductor and the neutral conductor is instead of the phase conductor, just to try to throw you off. But Where I got that from is, 220.61. You'll see it, just before the optional method of calculation begins. Page 79. Yes, page 79 is 220.61B1 technically. A kind of explains what the imbalance load is and what, how it, it's applied. B is the permitted reduction, which is that's where I got the 70% from. And then 1 kind of outlines what you could apply that to. Note 2 there is what we were talking about yesterday with that amount above 200 amps on a unbalanced load in excess of 200 amps on the feeder. We're talking about not derating that to neutral for a commercial load or whatever, but that's not something we'll cover right now. All right, so going back to the table there, just make sure you're adding a note underneath the table, just that derate neutral at 70%. Our grounded conductor maybe might be a way to put it in case they call it that instead of neutral. All right, if we have 10 dryers, it's really not that more complicated. Remember, if I'm using the table, it has to be a minimum of 5,000 watts, so you have that written on your table somewhere now. And please make sure you highlight that and don't ignore that note if you're gonna use that table. All right, and then 1 or 2 or 3 dryers, if they just use the term dryer on a test question, then simply plug in 5,000 watts, right? So they can just tell you a dryer and then you'll know what to plug in for that, okay? 1 through 4 is 100%. 10 of them would be 50,000, 5,000 watts for each dryer times 10 times 50%. And if they're asking me for the load on the grounded conductor, and my answer would look like this. I'd take 5,000 watts times 10 dryers, which would give me the, what is it, 50,000? Watts. We're gonna derate that at a factor of 50%. Give me 25,000 total kVA, or 25,000 VA. Make sure we do this math right, I don't want to get it wrong. 10 times 5,000 is 50,000. Times 0.5, right? It's 10 of 50%. 25,000, and then we've got 70% of that on the grounded conductor. 17. 17,500, or 17.5 kVA. I should put that down. Or 17,500.
So 25,000.
Say that again.
25,000, 70%.
70% for just for the neutral. If they ask me for the phase conductors, then it would be 25 kVA. So it's just one more step in case they ask you for the grounded conductor instead of the phase. So this would be the normal stop right here. Typically you're going to use this right here as your answer. That's really about as far as you go, but this would be if they're asking you for the grounded conductor. Okay? Now this table is really lazy. They could have taken the whole side of the page there and they could have come from 11 at 47, the next one would have been 12 at 46, the next one would have been 13 at 45, and so on and so forth. Been a really long table, so they got smart. You know what? We're gonna just say, look, from 23 dryers all the way up to 12, any mix of the dryers that go past 11, you're just simply gonna subtract 1% off of that 47% that's on that last row there. Make sense? In other words, every dryer past the 11 that's on the table there, you're simply deducting 1% for every additional dryer past 11. So you don't have to do the first 11 and then do the rest of them separately. You do them all together as a lump, right? So you don't worry about trying to do 2 steps.
Is that the same as that? So say you have 10 dryers, do you do all 10 dryers at 50%?
Well, yes, all 10 dryers at 50%.
Okay.
Yep,
Sure.
that's right. And so as is 23 dryers, for example, what I would do is I'd take 23 dryers. Remember, I've got 11 and 47 is what we've got up here. That's kind of where the table ends, or not doesn't end, but it changes, right? So 23 minus 11, that's going to tell me how many past 11 I went, which is going to be what, 12? I'm going to subtract, or I'm going to multiply, let me multiply that, times 1% for each one of those, and so I basically have minus 12% off that 47. It gives me 35%, if I'm not mistaken, right? Well, guess where the next row starts at? 35%. So it's very similar to what we just did here, but now instead of doing it at 1%, any additional dryer past 23 would be done at minus 1%.
0.5%.
But coming off of the 35 instead of the 47. Again, you don't have to do with them in steps because this number here already has the previous one built into it, right? So this 23 dryers, the answer would be 35%. So you take 23 times 5,000 times 0.23, or excuse me, 0.35, right? So it works just the same way, but after 23 dryers, instead of being at 11 at 47, now we're at 23 at 35%. So if we were to have 41 dryers then, process would be the same. It'd be 41 dryers minus the 23 that, minus 23. What does that give you? 18? No. Okay, it's 18. So I've got 18 dryers that went past the 23 line, which was what that 35% was. Each one of these now, instead of being 1%, it's gonna be a 0.5%. So just multiply that times 0.5%. Give you what, 9%? So we're subtracting 9% from 35, that gives us 26%. Thank you for the help. Appreciate that. And again, that's my derating factor, so I'm still gonna have to go back to the nameplate or the 5,000 watts, whichever's greater. Multiply that times the number of 41, and then multiply the 0.26%, gets that to the nameplate. And if they wanted the grounded conductor, times another 0.70. Okay? It's not a really complicated table, but it does get kind of a little bit head scratchy. But after that, if you go past 42, then it's just 25%. Anything 45 or 40, 43 and over, excuse me, it's just 25% period. Any questions on that? You feel pretty solid with it, or you got it down? Okay. Number 2, where a single 3-aught copper conductor enters an enclosure directly opposite its terminal block, where the terminal lug is of a lay-in type, what's the minimum space for bending radius permitted by the 2020 EDC? That's the we looked at a table briefly yesterday. Do y'all remember where it was at?
Yeah, 312.6.
Very good. There's 2 tables. There's an A and a B, if you remember correctly.
Yeah.
One of them was for your nightmare, where you've got the bottom feeder coming in the bottom. And when I have the top lug and the bottom feed, I've got to bend that set of wire, the feeders at the bottom, and then I've got to 90 them up the side, and then I've got to bend them again at the top, and I'm going to bend them again down into the lug, right? So a lot of stress on that conductor. I'm basically using the side of that enclosure as a wiring gutter, right? And then I've got my feeders, and you know, it smells like those color hammers where they got those long breakers, and you're trying to plug them in over there, and you got all your branch circuit wires, and then you got your feeders on top of that. It's a challenge, right? You've just made a wiring gutter on the side of that panel. So if you look at that 312.6A, you'll notice the label of that table is, let me get over there so I can say it, read it. 312.6A on page 180, it is minimum wire bending space of terminals and minimum width of wiring gutters. And so that kind of makes sense. We're using a table that's based on wiring gutters, you know, in a case where we're literally using the side of it as a gutter. If I've got a top feed similarly and a bottom lug, it's the same difference. It's I've got all that bending to get that thing into the terminals, and it's a lot of stress on that cable. And so that's kind of why we have the table to begin with. But the wire bending space around the terminals is not something that you guys control. It's manufacturer's set. Ultimately, you're just verifying it, I suppose, at the end of the day, but it doesn't really have much use for you beyond that. But at 3-aught copper on the table that we're on page 180, I've only got one single wire per phase, so I'm going to be in that first column. I'm at, let's see, 3-aught, which is the second row of that bottom group there, 3-aught or 4-aught. Gives me 4 inches, doesn't it? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Sorry. For some reason, I just got that backwards. Sorry. Directly opposite is terminal block. I was trying to explain the bottom part and why it would fit with that table. I'm not really thinking, but no, it's directly opposite is terminal block. So to clarify that and clean that up a little bit, sorry about that. The, again, yesterday, like I was trying to explain, for me, if you ask me what the opposite side of a terminal block is, I'm gonna say the opposite side of the tub, because that makes more sense to me, right? If the wires are entering directly opposite of the lug, for me, it seems like it's a bottom feed and a top lug, but it's not. They're talking about literally, if you've got the back, if you're standing in that panel and you've got your back with the lugs behind you, what's directly in front of you is what is directly opposite. In other words, which side is closer? In other words, the wire comes straight down into the lugs, or does it have to come in the bottom? It has to come in the bottom and go around, then that's the table over here on A, and it becomes in the top, and the lugs in the top. Table B is what we're talking about. So directly opposite, which is what this would be in table B. Sorry for, I don't know why I read that wrong. And we looked at this table yesterday. Note 2 down at the bottom has a removable lay-in lug rule that has all the different letters in there. So now we're looking at the table with the first column, 3 being the third row of that second group. We're looking at 6.5%, or 6.5 inches, excuse me. But that little tiny letter A, is it? God, you need glasses to read this thing, and it's a 1/2 inch reduction, so it'd be 6 inches. If you have trouble reading that, like I seem to have trouble reading that, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get you some prescription glasses at Walgreens before you go in there. You're supposed to be allowed to take a straight edge in. Lately, they've been real funky about letting anybody bring anything in at all, but I would probably just get you maybe not something like that that's plastic, but maybe if you have a piece of cardboard or something that you get from mail with just a blank piece of like glossy cardboard or something that you could use as a straight edge, wouldn't be a bad idea, like a bookmark or
If they
something.
give you a piece of paper, you could.
Nope,
Oh, they don't.
no more. They give you those boogie boards. So, and the boogie boards are just they're trash, man. I'm telling you. It's, and I've tried to sweet talk them. Just as general rule, I know a lot of you guys are early risers, and you're probably the first guys at work and on the scene before anybody else even gets there and already got coffee ready for everybody. But in this case, I prefer y'all to be kind of the last person in the door, because my theory is that if you're the first person, they're gonna do it by the book. Yeah, a whole audience of people, they're gonna make sure they go through your book, they're gonna be a little bit more thorough. But if you're the last person in the line, they're about to go on break. Could care less what you're doing. They just need to get you processed and get you in there and be done with it. And I think if you don't have anybody else behind you, you might even be able to ask them if you can have another boogie board or something like that. I mean, they're gonna have 5 of them on their desk. Just tell them, look, I've got a really complicated test, and it's just really hard to get all my notes on that one board and see what they say. You can alternatively ask them for paper and pencil and tell them that you have some sort of a reading dyslexia or something against green fluorescent, font or whatever. I mean, do what you think you can do, but I mean, it's if they tell you no, there's nothing you can do except accept it, but it wouldn't hurt to ask, right? All right. Oh yeah, one more other thing. When you first walk in the door, you got the little paper you got to sign in or whatever. They're gonna take your picture. Give you a little bag to put all your stuff in and lock it up so that you can't, have any of your things while you're in there. But when you go in there and sit down, the screen's gonna have a little window in it where you enter your social security number, right? I would prefer you to just leave that alone, because there's not gonna be any other moment that you have available to you where you're gonna have a set of prints that they gave you when you went in the door, but you're not gonna be started on your exam yet, right? I would like you guys to spend your time looking at those prints then, instead of after you started your clock and you've got things going, and then it's gonna be just that much harder for you to have any time to really look at it. Also gives you a chance to make sure you can read them, and if they're legible, and if you need another copy, you'll have time to go out there when the clock's not running to get that fixed. There are some test centers that seem like they have really poor copies of them, so just a helpful tip. Now, you're not gonna know necessarily what you're looking for, but at least you can familiarize yourself with what sheets you have, what's on the sheets. One-line diagram is probably a really good idea to look at that pretty thoroughly, make sure you understand what transformers are there, what the system voltage is, those kind of things. Should be a couple of tables with all your light fixtures and other electrical equipment and gear and things. So those are a good thing to review while the clock's not running. Now, if you are unlucky and they come in and escort you and they enter your social security number for you and hit the start button, then my next, I guess, step would be to ignore that little pretest that they give you in the beginning. That pretest is just there for you to prove that you're smart enough to figure out their computer software, so you can't complain later that you failed because you didn't know how to work the computer, right? So it's really just to cover their own butt. And I don't really care how many square miles there are in the United States, right? I mean, those are just some questions, just random stuff they ask you. I mean, just let it run. It's a 15-minute timer on it, and so that's your free time for your prints. So if they start it for you, that's fine. Just let it run. Don't worry about those questions. They'll go away in about 15 minutes. A window will pop up and say, "Are you going to start this thing or what?" So that'll be your cue to put up the plans and get started. Journeyman, I'm a real big fan of leaving my code book closed when I first start a test. And I'll tell you this. I've taken so many tests, and I've had some pretty challenging time frames. The certified building official exam is got 15 books. I mean, it's crazy, and it's like a minute and 15 seconds per question. Like, I mean, it's fast. And with that many books, I mean, you really got to know where you're going to look for stuff pretty quickly. And I thought to myself whenever I first took it the first time, I thought, I don't think I have time to do what I've always told my classes to do, so I didn't do what I always tell y'all to do, and I failed the test, believe it or not. And I took it a second time. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do what I tell my classes, and then I didn't. I went right back to what I did the first time, failed it. I mean, come on, seriously? So the third time, I stuck to myself, to what I'm telling you guys here in a minute, and I did exactly what I tell you guys to do, and it worked, passed. The reason for it is that, tests are especially in PSI's world, every test is unique. There's not ever two versions of the same test ever anymore. Every test is populated from their cloud of all the test questions they have, and every question they have is tagged with what category it is, or what row or what subject it is, as well as a qualifier for how hard it is and how much time it takes. So they use those to pull somewhat equally even scored exams for every person that are taking whatever exam type. And it's populated, I think, midnight or the next morning at the test center. So even the test center doesn't have it until the day you take your test, right? They're really, really funky about the security with it. Bottom line is, you don't know what the randomization of the stuff that they're gonna have on your test will be. And you don't know what the concentration of questions are. On a journeyman's test, sometimes I've seen nothing but Article 680 questions, nothing but swimming pools. I mean, it's just swimming pool after swimming pool after swimming pool question. And you go take it again the next time, you got no swimming pool questions on. You got a whole bunch of ranges or dryers or some other population of questions. So it's hard to really know what's on the test until you take the test, right? If you are like me, I call it the dumb luck factor, because I'll be looking for a question or an answer to a question, and I'll spend probably 15 or 20 minutes looking for that damn good answer, and I can't find it to save my ass. Finally, I just give up in desperation and move on to the next question, and about 5 minutes later, I'm looking for something completely unrelated, and bam, there's the answer to that question I spent all that time for. Has that ever happened to you before?
Yep.
It happens almost every freaking time. It works okay though, as long as they're in the sequence that I get to see the question that I don't know the answer for first. But if the question that I accidentally stumble on later on is question number 15, and the question that I don't know yet, the answer that I just stumbled on, is question number 80 or something, I'm not even going to remember where I saw that, much less know that it was something relevant to pay attention to when I stumbled across it. In other words, if I get the question that I don't understand first and then later on stumble on it, that's fine. But if it's the reverse of that, if I stumble on an answer, I wouldn't even know that's an answer because I haven't seen that question yet, right? So what I want you to do to kind of help yourself organize, be able to kind of look and see what concentration of questions are on your test, get a feel for where and what the volume of each one of those categories might be. I want you to read every question before you even open that code book. I literally want you to sit on it if you have to. And I'm telling you, as I'm standing in front of you, it works. It works for a lot of reasons. It works, but it puts you in the driver's seat, gives you information about what's on your test, and it really gives you a chance to organize them. And what you're going to do is you're going to sort those questions into 3 categories, 3 buckets. One of the beauties of their system is they've got a little go-to button at the top, and when you click that go-to button, it allows you to change the view of what you're looking at. And the view of what you're looking at can be all, which is where you're at unless you change it, right? Meaning you're going to see every question on the test, and you're going to have to flip through the next button to go forward and backwards, 1 through 100, or 1 through 85, or 1 through whatever it is for you guys. They've also got a view that's called the mark group. they've got a view that's called the unanswered group, and they've got a view for the answered group, right? So there's 4 different choices there. One of them is where you're always at. The other 3, though, is what you're gonna sort and organize your questions through and put them in those 3 categories as you're going through and reading the test the first time with the code book loads, right? So I want you to get all the benefits of knowing what's on the test, but I also want you to organize yourself so that you kind of understand how to process it. So you're gonna, basically, any question that you feel like you have the answer for, feel pretty confident about it, you don't necessarily need to look it up, just answer it, right? Just pick one of the 4 answers that you think is the right one, don't mark it, and then just hit next, right? That's gonna be in the answered group, right? There's gonna be a whole lot of them, though, that you understand the question, you might even remember where it's at in the code book, but you don't necessarily have the tables memorized. You might not know exactly what the answer is, but you may or may not have a good guess, right? But if it's a question that you understand and you kind of know where to go to find the answer, that's not one I'm really worried about, but I don't want to waste my time looking for it just yet. So I'm gonna just answer any one of the 4. It doesn't matter what I answer really. I'm just gonna pick an answer and then I'm gonna mark it so that they will go into the marked group and only be in the marked group, so I don't end up with questions that, basic questions that you gotta mark them, okay? So if you have one of that group, you're gonna mark them. Those questions are gonna be ones that you probably will change the answer to with a pretty high frequency, but if you understand the question, you kinda know where it's at, don't go digging for it, just pick an answer and mark it. That's the second group. So you got answered and then you got the marked group that always have answers with them as well. And then the third category is gonna be a question you run across, like a planned question, a question you don't understand what they're asking you about, you don't have any clue where it's at in the code book, you don't even have an idea what they're even talking, it could be written in Greek for all you're concerned, like you really don't even get traction on the question. Our calculation questions for the journeyman, if you guys are taking a journeyman's test, if it's a math question, skip it. Don't worry about reading it, just kinda understand roughly what category it is and then just hit next. Leave it blank, don't mark it, just leave it blank. So that's your third group. So you've got ones that you knew, ones that you kind of know and don't have a problem with, and you got the ones that you have no clue about, right? When you get to that 85th question on your test, you're gonna go up to the top of the screen and you're gonna hit that go to button and you're gonna go to the, not the marked category, the blank category, the unanswered category first, right? It's gonna take you on average about 45 minutes to run through all those test questions to do what I just said. But once you do that, and you go to the top and you click on the go-to button and you choose the unanswered questions, then you're gonna need to give yourself about probably 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours of what your time is left. You wanna leave yourself about 45 minutes left on the clock. But you're gonna spend probably the next 3.5 hours on that unanswered category. That's gonna be the hardest ones you're gonna deal with. As you're going through those, you're just gonna answer them, and if you again, don't feel really confident about the answer, but you just don't want to waste too much more time on it at that point, you can mark it and answer it, or answer it and mark it so that it drops out of the unanswered category. But when you're in the unanswered category group view, every time you hit next, it takes you automatically to the next one you left blank. You don't ever see anything but just the ones that you left blank, which is the beauty of this. The speed of that right there more than makes up for the time that you took to kind of organize stuff. And then after let's say you get down to about 45 minutes, let's say you have 3 or 4 questions you still couldn't answer, you just need to mark those, answer those, but do not mark them, because you don't want to waste any. If you've already wasted that much time and you still haven't found the answer, let it go. I mean, it's just not worth that kind of headache, right? There's gonna be some questions too, remember, that don't even count. So, I mean, you have to be judicious with your time, and if you spend more than 5 or 10 minutes on a question, it's just not worth it. Kick her to the curb and go to the next one, right? You just can't afford to invest a lot of time, because if it's one that doesn't even count for you, then you just wasted every bit of that time, right? So it's not worth the risk of investing more than 3 or 4 minutes on a question, period. If you can't find the answer to it, I'd rather you let that one go and take that 5 minutes that you would have wasted with that and go back and shore up a couple other ones that you felt like if you had a little bit more time, you could probably make sure the answer was right? I mean, there's enough people that fail with 1 or 2 points that's worth that time, I think, to do it that way. Finally, the last note about this whole thing is I know for a fact they put some of the hardest questions that are on your test, on everybody's test, the hardest ones that have the highest rating on their little internal deal, in the first 4 or 5 questions. And they do it on purpose, because they know you get psyched out real easy. You're nervous, You got a lot riding on this. God, you paid all that money for that class, that bald-headed guy. Shoot, I mean, that's a lot of stress on you, right? Baby mama's going, what do you mean you failed a test? What'd you do for a living? I mean, it's, you know, I got it, right? And you gotta go to work and tell them you gotta take some more time. I mean, it's embarrassing. I get it. So you're stressed out. You get question number 2, and you don't even know what they're saying. It's like, holy, what is this? And you spend 15 minutes, you put yourself in a bad position, you're starting to sweat, you got nerves. I've had people literally break down and just leave the test center because they just literally got so damn frustrated in the first 4 questions. They do it on purpose. I'm telling you. Don't let them screw with you like that. If you do what I'm telling you and you read every question, you're just gonna skip them. And they're not gonna bother you because they're not gonna get in your way. But if you do it your way and you do 1 question at a time, and God dang it, I'm not gonna go to question number 3 until I get question number 2 answered, dadgummit. You can't work like that. You're gonna have to let stuff go and be able to not get bogged down, especially in the first 5 or 10 minutes you're in there. They know that's the sweet spot of time that you're not really aware of how little time you really have yet. And so you're liable to waste more time on those questions if they're in the beginning than you would if they're at the end. Does that make sense? So they throw you off the game, you burn up too much time, and then you're on the 8 ball or behind the 8 ball. Is that what it is? Yeah, behind the 8 ball is the expression. The rest of the time you're in there. Don't let them do it. All right. If you open that code book before you've read question number 85, the bat phone's going to ring on my desk, and I'm going to be right behind you and slap you in the head. So I'm just telling you, leave that code book closed and do what it said. All right.
Same for masters too, because you were addressing during.
For a while, I was second guessing myself because the 2 minute drill is a lot, right? Until I took that dadgum minute and 15 second test, and it works still because it's the only way to organize yourself. Now, what you can't do is waste a whole lot of time with it. But I mean, if you read the question and you know kind of where it's at.
Instead of having 2 categories, I would just go to leave a blank one.
Yeah, I would just, anything that you just really don't understand, I would skip it, is really what I would do.
I wouldn't mark an answer
No.
and save it.
No. And I'd probably use my code book for some of them, but you've got to be really mindful of your clock, and you've got to mentally make sure that every question that you do, you've got a mental clock on it. If you get to that 2 minute time drill and you're still not any further closer to answering it, those would be the ones that probably mark and move forward. Because I mean, you give your best answer, best shot at an answer, and mark it so that it's still in the category that you can go back and grab it at the end if you have time left over. But I still think there's more benefits doing it my way on that part of it than it is to do it just randomly. All right. I hope that makes sense. Good luck. All right, let's go. All right, question number 3. This is commercial kitchen equipment. So there's 2 tables in the code book in Article 220 that deal with restaurants. One of them is an optional method. The other one is the table that you'll see is 220.56, and it's on page 77, 76. 220.56.
79.
Yeah, it's right there it's on the very top left-hand corner, page 79. Okay. On the top of that, commercial kitchens. On the top of that table, right, commercial kitchen. So that you don't accidentally try to use it for residential appliances or some of that nature. This is only commercial kitchens. The table that's on page 78, I want you to put residential kitchens only. That way you understand if you're ever on that page, you won't have to slow down and make yourself second guess. Table that's on page 78 is going to be residential cooking equipment only. The smaller table on page 79 is going to be commercial kitchen equipment only. All right. What if I had a kitchen that had a whole bunch of small electrical appliances, like a whole bunch of them? Mixers, blenders, small gas igniter equipment, things of that nature. You could have 15 different little items that have all plugged into the wall that have a fairly small load, right? And then I may have 2 gigantic ranges that are 12 kWs that are going on fire all day long, is almost as high as it can go, and it just never stops. I mean, that kind of a large load like that, if you start to use the volume of all of the appliances that I have in a kitchen to determine the derating factor that then is applied to all of them, it's a disproportionate derating of application, right? Because I've got these 2 gigantic ones that probably shouldn't really be derated, but I'm letting all these other smaller ones help me pull that number down, right? That's what this table is, and there's a warning when you use the table. You'll notice that it says the first 1 and 2 are 100%. You might want to highlight that, because what they're trying to tell you is that you never want to have a value less than the sum of the 2 biggest appliances in the kitchen. Whatever that number is, after you've applied that table, you have to make sure that the table value didn't dip below that other number, right? If that other number is higher, meaning the 2 appliances without any derating, number 1 and number 2 at 100%, if that number's higher than your table value, you have to go with the nameplate rating of those 2 biggest appliances, because you cannot ever lose sight of the 2 big ones in the kitchen and allow a table to draw you below what those 2 could actually produce if they're both in the middle of a busy lunch hour or something, cranking it out, right? So that rule, if you look at the heading of .56, if you go back a page, I think, you'll see the rule for that is right there on page 77. It's I have to kind of go look for it, but I think it's the last sentence or the last paragraph there, something that says that. Yeah, right there, where it says however, and that's an important however. Okay, so we've got all this commercial kitchen equipment. We're just gonna add up all of the nameplate ratings. So we've got a 12, we got an 8, a 3, a 3.47, and a 1.3 dog rotisserie. As the calculator loads show roofly.
I was like, what is that?
Where is that?
Sorry, sometimes I'm just juvenile. All right, so 12 plus 8. I'm gonna convert everything, by the way, into just KVA, right? That way on my calculator, I've already got it in KVA. When I do the application of the table, it'll give me KVA. Most of my answers on my screen are gonna be in KVA, so I'm gonna put 3.0 instead of 3,000, right? I'm gonna put 12, 8, 3, 3.47, and 1.3 into the calculator, just convert them as I go. And let's see, plus 3 plus 3.7, or 3.47. Plus 1.3. So 27.77 or 27.77 or 27,770 kVA or VA respectively is my total connected load for all those appliances, right? The derating factor for, is it 5 appliances is what we have, right?
Yeah. Just
On the table then is 70?
70%.
70 even?
Yep.
Oh, he's, that's the right I'm looking at. Times 7, 0?
Yep.
19.439, right? So I will agree that this is a correct answer, and it is an answer to choose from. It's, however, not gonna be our final answer, because this number then is from the use of the table that derated the overall service to have a value of 19.439, right? But remember in my rule, and I go back and I look at the 2 biggest appliances that are in that kitchen, which are gonna be what?
12 and 8.
Which is 20 kW. The larger than those 2 numbers becomes the nameplates of those 2 biggest appliances, so 20 kW would be the answer, just because the table value drew it down too far. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Makes sense? I don't know how you need to kind of keep that mentally in your mind, but I think the fact that 1 and 2 both have 100% to me logically kind of helps me remember it, right? So it's either the 2 biggest ones at 100% or the table value, whichever number is larger.
Okay, so I got lost.
Okay, no problem.
You add all the.
I took the 12 and the 8, the 3.
You add all of them, and then what do you did?
Okay, so if you look on the table, since there's 5 appliances on the question, right? On row 5, there's a multiplier that's 70%.
Okay, you multiply it.
Yeah, point times point 7. So it's 27,770, which is the total nameplate when I add them all up. And then we multiplied it according to the table. The derating factor there is 0.70, so multiply that 27,770 times 0.70. And that gave me 19.439. Now they only worry about the second significant digit on anything in the PSI world. That last digit, which is a 9, doesn't round up to 3. Just drop it and put a decimal in where the comma is. Okay, so it'd be, instead of 19,439, it would just simply be 19.43 kVA. Okay?
Seems like if you just take your 2 biggest ones, it's gonna be your answer, because the more small ones you have, the lower you're gonna drop it down.
Not necessarily, but I mean, I know what you're saying. If there are appliances that you have that are also in the kitchen are larger than what these were, then, you know, you could have a number that's just slightly above the two biggest appliances, so I mean, I hear what you're saying. You don't wanna do it, you wanna do it both ways, because, or you wanna apply to the table, cause what happens if you have a number that's, other appliances that work in concert with the range of the two biggest ones. I mean, so like in a larger kitchen where you got like 20 different things, I mean, it'd be pretty easy for that table to be drawn down pretty quick, so I get what you're saying, but.
Always work it out, Tim.
I mean, when it's my, see, the thing about that, let me give you my answer to that. I've been asked to be an expert witness in a couple of court cases, and both cases that I've been asked to be a witness for were gunning after, not the company that employed him, not the employees that actually did the work, but guess who?
America.
What? The master electrician. This guy, this was a job that both of them, in both cases, they were work that they'd done a decade ago, and somebody was suing the crap out of them. And they're on that, they were on the stand, you know, giving testimony against themselves, basically. I mean, don't put yourself into that situation. If you've ever gone through something like that, the minutia detail of what's gonna be thrown at you is gonna be this table, and like, for example, if we, you know, they're gonna wanna know that, they're gonna wanna see your notes that you did the calculation. I mean, it's one of those things that, it just takes a couple extra minutes or two, and then, I mean, you're covered, and at least you did the math, and you know that you followed the code, and you can confidently say that, and then if the place burns down, it's not your fault, right? I mean, so, it'll be something that NFPA has to figure out if they need to adjust the table or something, but, the liability, the licensing is really not about how good an electrician you are, it's about you being liable for your level of knowledge and being basically responsible for that if you screw something up. And so the master's license in Texas is kind of a scary thing, because both these cases, they were within, I think, 6 years, I think, of the job. So I mean, it was far enough back that he didn't remember, he probably never stepped foot on the job site. He worked, the second one was a guy that worked in Dallas or lived in Dallas or something, and the job was down in Austin. Yeah, it's probably obvious that it just had some journeymen that were, I think they were hired hands from some temporary company even, so they didn't even work for anybody, it's a mess. And so the only person they had left that was liable that they could go after was the master, because his license was on the permit. So, I mean, that's a legacy you don't wanna live through. All right, question number 4. Oh, you guys got that one nailed down, right?
No.
We did that one yesterday. So we're talking about receptacle loads, right? In a commercial, that's a 220.14I. Yesterday, I told you to put commercial next to the 220.14I and residential under the J. Specifically for receptacle outlets. If you didn't draw a little receptacle next to I, maybe put a little receptacle there so that it stands out like a sore thumb with your pen or whatever. Write the word commercial real big in the margin there so you can see it. Try not to use pencil, try to use pen if you can. The reason why that is, it gives you.
Do you have an extra highlighter I can borrow?
I probably do. Probably got a bunch of them. Well, I think
You got one?
I got one, thank you.
Okay. All right, so, what was I saying? The number of receptacles that were listed in the question are gonna be the first step, and really the ampacity and whether it's duplex or whatever is irrelevant. So, my question is gonna always be, anytime I'm doing receptacle loads, the first question I'm gonna ask myself though, to make sure I know where I'm at, am I doing a branch or am I doing a service calculation? Because they're two different things, right? Is this a branch or is it a service?
Service.
Okay, so we will use part 3 and any derating tables that happen after part 3, which is the one that we looked at yesterday with that 10,000, first 10,000 you can't touch and so on and so forth. So you're gonna count up the number of receptacle outlets for receptacles, and then multiply those times 180 VA as described in section I. So we've got 15 and 20 and 10 and 20, right? 30, 40, 50, 65? Is that right, 65?
Yeah. Number 1.
So I'm gonna take 65 total outlets for receptacles. By the way, that's the magic number, 65. If you do 64, it's under that 10K. If you do 65, you're just above the 10K. So that's the break point where that table will come into play, just in case you wanted to know. But 65 general purpose outlets for receptacles at 180 VA for a service, meaning I'm gonna use both parts 2, which is where this comes from, and part 3, which is where that first 10,000 is gonna be at 100%, and then the balance above that is gonna be 50%. So I'm gonna take 65 times, it's 10,800, is that what it comes up here, 10,000?
700.
Huh?
10,700? Or 11,700?
Was it 11,007? Maybe 65 isn't the break point then. No, it's, I'm sad, I take that back, it's not 65 then. I mean, it's not 65, but it's a break point, I guess that's the way a little bit more. Anyway, times 180 VA, it's 11,700, like you said. 11,700. So I've got basically this amount right here, which is the amount that's above the 10K, right? I'm gonna take 50% of that number and all of that first 10,000. So it's 11,700 minus 10,000, because I'm gonna take the 10,000 out of this number here. And that's gonna leave me 1,700 or 17, or 1,700 or 1.7 kVA. And that's the balance that's above 10K, right? I'm gonna take half of that number, and the table we're talking about is 220.44 on page 70, is it 76, 77? Page 76, the very bottom right-hand corner. If you didn't yesterday block that out with a highlighter, just like make a big box or something, it would probably help, because it really does kind of tend to hide down there. It looks just like another piece of article, but it is what is this, 850? Yeah, 850. So when I multiply this, 1,700 times 0.50, that gives me 850 left over. That goes over here with the 10K that we had left over earlier, or took away earlier, and that gives me 10,850, or 10.85 kVA. Now, that's for a service calculation. Had they been asking for a branch circuit, I would have left it at 11,700. Okay? I'll say it again. If they were asking me for a branch circuit, I would have left it at 11,700. The connected load and the branch circuit rating are gonna be 100%. The derated demand factor would only be applied to a feeder calculation. I want you to go back to page 76, yeah. On page 76, I want you to highlight that part 3 with some other highlighter cover, because I mean, you really need to make sure you don't forget that, because that's a pivotal core understanding of how to apply 220, and it gets a lot of people in a lot of trouble because they kind of forget that, and they try to apply these tables to a branch circuit calculation, and they're kind of trying to lead you into that anyway. So anything you can do to kind of clear that up for yourself, you just want to take a different highlighter color, and right there you want to make that stand out a bit. Maybe put a star next to it, or underline it in red ink or something. Just
What was that?
on page 76, that part 3 where it says feeder calculations, just so that you have a big red flag anytime you're back there that, hey, remember these tables that follow after this are only to be used if it's a feeder or service question, not a branch circuit. Aight. And did you guys do this one? Anybody take a shot at this one?
I did.
I'm gonna have to manually calculate it out real quick, because I don't remember where I wrote down the answer to it, but it won't take very long. So let me just get through here real fast. Don't worry about this 250 kC mill being in a pipe with a bunch of small wires. Doesn't matter. They're all gonna count the same as far as, I mean, if it's physically there, I don't really care what it's doing. I just gotta count for it, right? So don't spend any time trying to figure out the design of why this is the way it is. Don't worry about there being 2 different raceway types. Just look at both tables, and whichever table gives you the larger raceway, right? Yeah, make sure you have the larger raceway size would be the one to apply. If it forces you to have a bigger raceway size, it's because the interior is smaller, right? So then if you size it all for the smallest value, then it'll cover both pipes, right? You would pick the one that makes you pick the biggest answer, right? Which would be,
Yeah.
because it's got a small interior. It's got a backward, right? Right.
The less circuit.
If you, like, what he was trying to clarify was if what I was trying to say is that I'm gonna look at both pipes, right? Both tables, whichever one of those tables causes me to have the largest answer in inches, right, on the ID, is gonna be the one I would answer, or pick for the answer. And in this case, the Schedule 80 is a smaller interior diameter, and will force you to have a bigger pipe because of that. So anytime you have a mix of Schedule 40 and Schedule 80, Schedule 80 is gonna be the table to use. EMT and rigid are the other ones that I see occasionally, and they're, rigid's gonna have the smaller interior diameter. I don't get that either, like, we do an interior diameter, so like a half inch, how hard is it for a manufacturer to take a half inch die and build their pipe around that half inch die? For God's sakes, like, you'd think it would all be a half inch, that's kind of the whole point of it, but I can see it having a thicker, like an outside, right, different sizes, but anyway. Okay, it's because the fittings all have to be the same. We've got XHHW, XHHW, THWN, and THHW. Be careful with this one, and these being 3 different installation types, so that's a lot of times I see people kind of forget that, and they'll write stuff down, they'll go back and they'll try to pull the THHW right out of the same bulk of the XHHW. So I'm gonna start with table 5. I'm gonna add up all of the stuff that I see there in table 5. We're gonna do the XHHW first on 701 and 702. I believe is where that is. Yep, 702, 703, sorry. XHHW at the bottom, starts at the bottom, page 702. I've got a number 8 and a number 4. I don't wanna look at this. Try your best to ignore that part right there. Stay focused on the size, because otherwise you'll get dyslexic and start doing, 8 number 6s or whatever, which is kind of what they were trying to get you to do there. So I've got number 8, so number 8 XHHW is gonna give me a value of 0.0437. I'm gonna write all these down on my boogie board, I'm not gonna do the math yet, just so I don't get, unfocused. I've got a number 4 up there that's also XHHW, that's gonna give me a value of 0.0814. I've got THWN, so I'm gonna stop and go over to THWN, which is gonna be on page 701. THWN starts at the middle there of page 701, and I've got a number 6. That's got a value of 0.0507. The last one, which is the THHW, it technically starts on page 700, but then it skips and comes back to the top of page 701. So a 250 KC mill would give me a value of 0.4596. I wrote all this down because I don't want to accidentally go back and look at the number and get myself confused, because it'd be real easy to do. So now that I've got 4 values written down on my boogie board, I'm going to go back and go, okay, 6, 8, 4, and 1. I'm going to put that in front of each one of these. That way I keep my math clean, and I'm just going to do the math real quick. So I've got 0.0437 times 6, so on and so forth. That's 0.2622. 0.6512, .2028, and 0.4596. And I'm gonna just add these together. $1.5758. Anybody agree or disagree? Alright, that's in inches squared. I took all that wire, I compressed it down into the bottom of the pipe, I cut it, and I measured the surface area that wire displaces, and it came out to be 1.5758 inches square. I have to have a pipe that has more than that available space in it, right? So I'm gonna look for some larger number than what my total calculated value would be. I'm gonna look in Schedule 80 and Schedule 40 both to make sure that I've got, and if they're both the same size, they're both the same size, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's not, the answer is gonna be in diameter, not necessarily the type of pipe. So I'm gonna go back to table 4. Schedule 80 is gonna be the first one that you see on, Schedule 80 is on the bottom of page 698. Schedule 40 is at the top of page 699. I'm looking for 40% fill because I don't have anything about the length of it being one way or the other, so I can't ever assume a nipple. So I'm gonna assume this to be a regular run, and because it's over 2 wires, it's 40%. I'm looking at a number that needs to be larger than 1.5, and I'm looking at a 2.5 inch schedule 80. Or alternatively, I'm looking at a 3 inch schedule 40. No, I'm sorry, excuse me, 2.5. We have 2.5 on that one, and what do we have on the? Same. Okay, so 2.5 inches. Sorry, I got dyslexic, I was trying to.
I understood.
Let me make sure.
That one's
So we're
the easiest one to
1.5,
understand.
yeah, 1.8, that's comfortable.
If you can read the table, it's fine.
And 1.5. The
Pull it, just eat it.
the one 6 horse, no.
I can't understand what you're saying.
No, I was saying that.
Like, I understand it, but like, once I have to get it in going, I'm just like, what?
Each is in that packet's like $9.
No shit.
No, so we could do it in a 2.5.
I did it late an hour and I was like, fuck this.
And then on this one, we
I ain't
have
gonna stress
2.5.
myself more.
That could also be
It's bad, right?
They both come out to 2.5%. I probably need to go back and put two of those 250s or something in
I
there.
fucking.
I wanted to show
I
you this,
didn't
number one,
agree,
because
like,
I don't think they have both of these things in the same
Sold out.
question. I think they're two separate types of questions. One of them
Sold out, yeah.
is a bunch of really small conductors that have like 4 number 8s and 8 number 4s, where they're trying to make you kind of get dyslexic and get confused. And then they've got this whomp and 750 kc mill in the middle of all that small wire, and a lot of people just kind of lock up because we're trying to figure out why that would be. Doesn't matter, really. If it's there, count it. If it's not, don't count it, but don't worry about what it is or why it's there. And then this second part where they split the raceway into 2 different types. Don't sweat it, just look them both up, and whichever one makes you have a larger diameter will be the answer. Right. Okay. All right. You guys feel better, much better about all that? Alright, we've got, I'm gonna have to give you a break right now, because with the next thing we're gonna talk about is wire ampacity, and it's gonna take us a little bit of time to concentrate on that. So I'm gonna give you a 10-minute break, and then when we come back, so we'll come back at the top of the hour, give you a little bit, about 11 or 12 minutes, and I'll see you back. We're gonna do wire ampacity next, so.
Where y'all out here from?
Call station.
Oh, yeah.
Not far. What about you?
I'm from Hobbs, bro, New Mexico.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. I gotta drive back home today.
No
I
shit.
gotta go to El Paso tomorrow.
What are you getting your Texas license for?
Cause I work in Texas, but I work in Odessa.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of good golf courses
Damn.
in New Mexico.
The what?
A lot of good golf courses in New Mexico.
Nah. No, I honestly have been to the one in, sorry. I think Denver City's pretty nice. That's in Texas. And I think Plains too, Plains, Texas. That's a pretty nice one too. Yeah, but I come from Odessa.
Odessa. Out for the league.
Goes right on to the next page, kind of skips a little bit. So is it the smaller one out of the two? He said whatever is the smaller one.
And you go with the smaller one, cause if you go with the big one,
and they have to then be just a little bit tighter fit,
Right.
and go to that 80, it's gonna make it harder to pull.
Okay.
Well, this one was the same answer.
Less room for heat dissipation.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the clarification.
That's the main thing, is it's for heat dissipation.
Right, so you always wanna go with the smaller one, because that's gonna be.
But when the head guys hit, it's like, when you have 3 or more terminal conductors, another charge, that you gotta derate your wires
Right.
for that. So that you can see a little more.
Yeah, yeah, I've been knocking my head about that one, that's the one I need to set up with. Maybe you don't get the other. That's the one. TikTok's cracking me up.
Tesla?
Decent. They asked, like, they tried to ask, they did try to trap you.
Yeah.
You get that, so, it's still doing that.
I might like to see if I set it all on. Maybe add a little more.
So, you want to keep your act.
Cash out, then just in case for emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I don't have fucking savings. You have savings? I use cash. I keep cash on savings. I just like have options. But I don't like it, cause I would just not transfer shit over. I don't trust myself. Because I can do that. But I have to have a certain.
You see this number, this question, that's not that. That's an
That's
Taking breakfast, let's say it should have been here about an hour earlier.
what I was going off of. Once I got to work. I haven't seen her yet. How is she? She's like, how she was right? She had I showed her mine, she's like, fuck you. It was after I said, try to Ranger. You want those, bro? I was like, which ones?
The Travises, they're about to release the new Travises.
That's what I thought we were doing.
See when they're released, you see.
Full page. Let's see how fast it
I was gonna work my Yeezys today too, and I was like, fuck, man, it looks like it's about to rain. I don't want no 350s like Drake said.
Huh?
Cause that's what's keep, Drake's like, keep it real around me, don't wear no 350s. I don't even, honestly, I like shoes, and I got a lot of shoes, but I don't know about them Yeezys, man. They look comfortable though. They're fucking shit. Yeah. But the thing is, que son de tela, y they're minor like green. They're not white, they're like a tannish. Right. I think I've seen them.
They get fucking dirty shit.
Dirty as hell, right?
They all full of shit.
And it's really hard to get it out of that type of tela, right?
Mhm,
Cause that tela is like, it's porous. It's like worse than this one.
I just paid
Yeah.
cash.
I was like, I just have easy, I just have those, but I'm just
To buy her ring.
like 15 pairs of men and these, bro.
She was
I have the Mexico ones, the Mexico City ones. I bought those like for $100, bro. They were just barely released. Yeah. I told my grandma, buy you because these are big Mexico. Y los tenía y me los puse, because I used to live in, se llama Seven, donde vivía antes. Y hay un chingo de tierra roja, it looks like clay. Me los puse and they fucking got dirty that first day I wore.
Got it
off or what? I'm never able to. Y luego I went online the other day on StockX. Yeah. Looking them up. They're $2,500. I was like, fuck. I felt stupid for doing that shit. Cause 9.5 is like a very rare size to find right now. Everybody from 9 to like 11, everybody's that size. Bottom out, yeah. And I have mine are 9.5, and the 9.5 are going for $25.
Yeah.
I was telling my girl, I was like, oh, that's stupid. Is that what your dad's like?
Yeah, nobody in
Fine,
cash.
because they're collectibles.
Yeah.
It's a whole movie.
I went to the Hot Box, and I did this just for like $30 when I was in college. The whole box, break everything, it was cheaper than
Damn.
Nah, mine are, they were just $100, but I can rent them.
You know, regular fuck,
It's a lot,
better breaker, cheaper.
I don't like that much.
The power breakers.
I was like 400.
It was like, fuck.
Yeah, no,
That's the last time I played. That's when I was in college.
follow the chart, once you follow the chart, and then you're good.
My little sister likes to spend money on fucking shoes, bro.
But you bought her some shit.
Some red bottoms.
For
real? Pero, so like they look like the high, you know, the high top for dudes, but for women, bro, that's
That's
cute.
how it sounds.
She paid like, I think she
Did
said
she
like
ask you?
25 or 1200.
1250, something like that. It's like,
It's fine, man.
I mean, I want some too, so nothing chill. I like them, but they're comfortable, bro. I try them on and they're comfortable. But, man,
Yeah, I'm at the
like
point where
900 for shoes, I'm like,
I'm
what
at
do
the
you want to
point
spend that much money on shoes?
Back when I was a kid, like, I was tripping, but now I'm just like trying to save up, bro. Instead of spending money on myself.
I just bought my second house 2 years ago.
I saw
So, like,
I
I mean, right now,
think that was his
I
truck.
already want to spend
Well,
money on
it says Tennessee, it had a show.
houses, properties.
Is that the part?
Cause I have a single one that I'm about to sell, and like 4.5 acres. And then I'm about to sell my house.
We're at goddamn New Mexico.
No, that one's in Texas. Seminole, it's called Seminole. That, I mean, it's borders. Borderline with Mexico.
West Texas.
Yeah,
That's where you work at, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of industrial out there.
Yeah, so I got my land out there. 4.5 acres on the my house I just bought 6 years ago. But I bought that one in New Mexico. Cause the taxes, bro, in Texas.
Oh, they're still
Fucking outrageous, dude, in that town, it's like,
You still gotta pay like $1,000 in Austin. Like
for taxes?
Yeah,
Bro,
like
that's,
12,000.
that, down there, they just rebuilt the high school, and they're rebuilding the, like, the roads. And I think, cause my dad, he has a 2,500 square foot house. I think he pays like $15,000 a year of taxes, bro.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But that's just for the house, cause he has like, I think he has like 14 acres.
Yeah,
And I think for the acreage, he pays like $2,000. So he ends up paying like 17,000 total.
Imagínate, divided by 12, that's.
Well, and he pays him like $3. So I'm like, I told him, like, bro, it's like paying rent anyways. You never fucking own your house. Especially when, cause my house is 2,300 square foot, and
I feel like you can get
I feel like it's like $800 a year.
Yeah.
Like $60, like $60 the mortgage.
And luckily, I was with an inspector down there in Austin, and he's like, it's my last day. So he literally walked in, he's like, what you got? Started showing him. Like 3 minutes later, he's like, alright, you're good. Show me your panel. I said, show him my panel. Alright, you're good. I was like, and you know, you're the second easiest inspector I got it. And he's like, yeah, it's my last day. I'm going to Ohio, building a house down there. He's like, man, he's like, I was like, oh, so you quitting? He was like, yeah, I'm quitting.
Mason was telling me about like something about math.
Too expensive to live down there. So bought me some land in Ohio, bought me a couple acres, I'm selling my house.
The only thing
My
about
property taxes down there are $680 something. Like a year, like I just paid in full. I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, my girl's cousin, he builds custom homes in here in like Fort Worth.
Yeah.
He lives right there. Have you heard of Possum Lake?
I haven't heard of it, but I know where
Possum
Fort Worth
Kingdom?
is.
Yeah, Possum Kingdom Lake. He lives his house is like on the
Oh,
beach.
no.
It's a lake house.
Yeah.
He built it, bro, and it's like, yo, I think it was like $1 million, bro. And he started it for like
Oh, yeah.
But I asked her, like, why'd you sell me, like, bro, property? I'm gonna have to crazy, like, cause I don't think, like, you just don't sound so good. Because of the water, like, being so close to the lake is insurance, y todo ese pedo.
Oh, yeah.
It's outrageous, dude.
That's like a Ferrari, right? When you're under 25.
Well, and dude, it's crazy, cause he was just manager for a Quick Trip. Like, he was a manager at a Quick Trip, but his dad works in construction. My girl's field, he does hace bloque. Y pues he got all the contacts and he built his first house, like he bought land, built his first house, he lived in it for like a year, and then sold it, bro, for like double where he built it. And de esa casa, güey, construyó dos casas. Like, hizo una, and then for him to live in, he built another one and got a, he bought the land, le dieron un loan para el builder's loan. And that's how he started, bro. He started with like a $250,000 house. He just sold his lake house. He compró otro terreno. And he's building another house. It cost like $3 million to build it. Pero, haz de cuenta que la casa va a estar así. Around, aquí en el medio va a poner una alberca, and the lake is back here, so like nobody's gonna ever like reach shit. Porque sus vecinos también they were being carriers, bro, because he likes to party a lot, bro.
Oh, yeah.
Like he had like 7 parties at his house.
Yeah.
Y la chota because his music's too loud or whatever, so he
Nobody.
And where's this at, on forward?
Huh?
On, he's doing that forward?
Yeah, and Hazel. So, I mean, it's all one thing.
There you go. My sister's like that too, yeah. That's why I don't care about Elgin and Maine and Texas.
Really?
But I really small little ones as well. I'm about to get into myself.
I think it's actually not an issue.
Right now I'm saving up for that.
Yeah, bro, they have some nice bushes. Cause my brother-in-law's trying to move over here. Yeah. That's his house that he just sold. That's the one I was telling you. That's a lake house.
Shit, CCC and features that they were.
It's fucking beautiful, dude. And he just sold it to you because his neighbors were being Karens.
That's awesome, but
I don't know if he has any. And then he's doing an infinity pool on it.
yeah.
Like, just looking to the lake.
And he bought another, so he bought another property out there by the lake, or is it?
Yeah. Pero, I mean, he was complaining about his taxes and he's still gonna build there again.
He has more money to play with.
Yeah.
And then, so,
Yeah, cause he made double what he, I mean, he's been pretty much doubling everything, you know?
so that would, that should, leave percentage cost.
Let me see if I had a video on my snap for his pool.
Hey, Jesus, you seen no boy get outside yesterday? That was horrible, bro.
Talking about, I'm really on his fucking. Sorry, shit.
They had one dude, Isaac gave him a better fight. He did, honestly.
No, since the lockdown, he was.
2 or 3
He doesn't wanna
Oh,
fight.
he was very patient.
Yeah, that's the pool. Yeah, in the backyard. Yeah, across the lake.
Yeah, I think before you can re-hit like the honeypot fire.
And Hazelton's that junto a Forward? Eso, construir casas. Mira.
La respuesta ahí era, si no te vas a hacer
No, porque lo que va abajo de la tierra, pues, ¿verdad? Porque lo que va abajo de la tierra va a ser 40 PVC, 40 schedule 40 PVC. Y los tubos, los que para arriba, los verdes, van a ser de 80. Pero agregas todos los cables, lo que mide el cable. Sí. Y ahora te vas a sacar nomás de los cables de road por 40% y el 40%. Así que ya te vienes aquí PVC rigid, eso aquí te vas a meter con el que tenga el casi cerquitas a ese número. Y el que tenga el número más grande, digamos que si el 3 estuviera en 1.6 entonces ya le pones el 3, porque tiene que ser
Most of the U in the Caldwell that tire station I used to work at. Back to you.
Sí, porque
Jacked it up after jacked it up, took the spare wheel,
Bien, chiquitos que vamos a escoger en eso, right?
that shit was
So que era más chiquito porque no pone aquí los shorts that day. No, no, porque estás usando two different type of pipe.
Sand.
Pero dice,
What is the minimum size? Sí, sí, por eso, pero, o sea, minimum size, porque si pones 2.5 de este, y en este sí cabe el de este, pero digamos que en este no copias, ¿cómo lo vas a meter en tu? Tiene que ser el mismo size de tanto.
yeah, so like it's good to
It's not supposed to be.
or the bigger
No, the bigger one, the smaller inner diameter is,
but the answer is this one.
it's the same, because you're still gonna, run both of those.
Tienes que checar
Easier to
que
que quepan los dos.
Then and there, you know.
si aquí fuera más chico.
Pero la cosa
It's like,
oh,
only
okay, so
a
it's 2.5.
Yeah, so the inner diameter, porque
But
pasan
the
los cables bien.
Pero el answer is 2.5. Para los dos.
Sí, sí, porque por ejemplo, que si fuera, digamos que uno fuera 3 y el otro fuera 2.5, pues se va a chavar. Porque you could always go bigger in one, but you can't go smaller.
Just slung the tread off.
Esos tabs no los compraste.
I bought the wood.
Oh, okay.
Well, I didn't know about it.
Yeah, it's like I wanted.
My boss actually did it. Like the owner of the company, he's like, oh, good day. Like, I fell asleep and wake up and just like, "Hey, I'm tired." I was 3 years old.
Pero these are the
Andy Reese? I think he's overrated, bro. And Andy.
I think
You know what I
I
want to
think
see?
he's just a warrior. You know what I'm saying? So he'll like get one or two big fights.
I want to see. I want to see Pitbull again, bro.
Who?
Pitbull with Tanks.
Oh. Is that?
The guy that el mexicano güey que se peleó con Tank que le dieron la decisión a Tank.
Yeah. That's who I was talking about yesterday. That dude gave him a way better fight. You know what I mean? Than Ryan. Like,
I think Pitbull won that fight, bro. I mean, you know, Tank was a bigger fighter. Their decisions always gonna go to the next fight.
yeah. That's like when
Mayweather and De La Hoya was going out already, bro.
Yeah.
They had to give it to him.
yeah, exactly. Like that was a brawl. I'll fuck with that. And then it's done.
De La Hoya? Oh, I think so too, bro. 'Cause he didn't even get punched that hard in the gut to go down.
But like the thing is, like, how the fuck don't you stand up? You in the middle of the top. I mean, you on stage, bro. That's the biggest fight of your career. Like,
Bro, tú más fuerte tazo que le metió el knockdown.
Dicen que es un vergazo.
duelo.
Duele más que un carrazo en la cara.
Pues, pero de todas maneras le pegó así, fue como, se ve como si fuera un rozo nomás, no le...
No, pero sí le hizo contacto
No,
bien.
pero yo la estaba viendo ahorita, se me son todas
Yeah. But la cosa es que, like, whenever you get hit like that, it's like losing your breath, right? So you, like, if you're on your knees, they never gonna catch your breath. You gotta stand up. I would've stood up, bro.
No, yo creo que el vato no quería.
Andaba, ya no andaba peleando bien. Andaba desesperado.
Parece que lo mató el del dos.
En verdad es like, ese vato no es un peleador completo, like, no es como Canelo que dancing, you know what I mean? Like
No boxea.
El vato se burló de
he's just got like a couple good things about him.
¿Sabes qué es vato?
That's his power shot.
Su power shot.
That one, he hit in the first round.
Pelea le dio el left side. No para su right.
No, pues que
That's what I was saying, and I was like, bro, you gotta push. He's scared to throw those combos because he didn't want to open it up.
Sí, pero es que Ryan es derecho y es zurdo. Por eso estaban los dos peleando en el mismo lado.
Eso fue lo que lo mandó.
Alright.
Oye, los 10 minutos de este compa fue como media hora, ¿no?
Yes, sir.
Fumando de la buena.
Vale, le va a hacer una mezquita de arriba del roof. Pues lo mismo, $10,000 en este fin de semana. ¿Cuánto te sale de hecho? Ya somos 20. Y luego muchos ya.
Pero no creo que
Around 53, 300 is being on the taste and right, the underground. And then 70% of that would be for the ground.
Yeah.
Yo lo comencé a ver en YouTube
Um,
y luego ya después.
Well, when we take it to the pawn shop,
No, no, no.
that's stolen, so they had to take it.
Para el chile.
So he was out, took $400.
Speaking of receptacles for temporary sites or temporary job site or temporary power, 590, Article 590. And it's just probably wouldn't be a bad idea, just kind of skim through 590. Not a whole lot of questions, but they tend to be kind of weird. There is a assured equipment conductor program that is listed on page 506. And it's required to be at intervals not exceeding 3 months. That's a testing performed on assured equipment grounding conductor program. It's on page 506, right-hand column. And I think it's a federal program if I remember correctly, but at any rate, that's on the right-hand side down there under GFCI protection number 2. Assured equipment grounding conductor program. Its testing is required under 3D at intervals not exceeding 3 months. And then if you look on page 505, 590.3 is the time constraints. That's either the period of construction or 90 days for temporary electric power. And then removal requires you to remove all of it. And then the receptacles under D on the right-hand column. If you look to the right under D1, the last sentence there, receptacles on construction sites will not be installed on any branch circuit that supplies temporary lighting. No receptacles on lighting circuits. And then under C, splices, which is down under, this is kind of weird, so it goes to D, E, F, and then C.
G.
That's G, isn't it? But mine says C, not G. Must be a typo. Did yours say G?
Yeah.
Okay, mine says C, it's kind of I got one of those fake books, it's just, you have a C, so we both have fake books. Did you get yours on Amazon for like a really good price?
Of course.
There you go. Me too. No, I'm just kidding. I traded somebody for this, I wish I wouldn't have. Let's see. Splices, a box conduit body shall be required for all splices. There is some exceptions there that I've got highlighted for some reason, but I've got them highlighted, so it wouldn't hurt to get highlighted yours under exception number 1. And then protection from accidental damage under H. That whole thing's highlighted. And the last thing I mentioned, which is actually going back to page 506, it's on the right-hand column at the very top under receptacles on 15 kVA or kW or less portable generators. That lists all the ones that are required to have ground fault circuit interrupter protection personnel. And it gives you 15 and 28, 125, and 50 volt, including those as part of a portable generator, so on and so forth. All right, I just had a note here from somebody about them, I just want to give that to you. There's a question that's floating around out there that has to do with lights in a flower bed that are like 3 feet tall and they're 5 feet away from a wall, from a pool, that do they need a GFCI or not? It is not, I mean, they're talking about the pool, so the pool automatically wants you to kind of go toward like a 680 and go through there. But it's a lighting question that has to do with Article 411, not 410, but 411. It's probably the shortest article in the entire code book. And just want to put it on your radar so you'd have it. Article 411, she is so short, I mean, it fits on one page, 286. It's literally, I really do think it's the shortest article in the code book. I don't think anything's shorter. Ironically, out of the entire 411.1 through 411.8, there's only 8 sections in there. I've got every one of them practically highlighted, so it wouldn't hurt to just read the entire article. Sounds like a lot of work, but it's probably only about 10-15 minutes. It is a requirement, let's see, this one is a 3 feet tall, it's a 3-foot wall that's 5 feet from the edge of a pool. And they're asking you, do the lights in the flower bed need to have GFCI protection? And so we would find that next to 411.5B, I think. Lighting systems shall be installed not less than 3 feet horizontally from the nearest edge of the water unless permitted by Article 680. Does it say anything about GFCI?
Wouldn't it be a 0.7?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
low voltage transformer has to look into it.
Where do you see that at? On,
That's just the way up 30 years.
oh, I got you. It may be that. It's, I don't see anything that requires, or do you guys? Specifications, I know there is some rule, there is some.
184.
680.224.
Yeah, I know there's something in 680, but I think that's, 20 amp branch circuit minimum, or maximum. Conductors isolation.
Pretty kind of good.
Well, I mean, the GFCI I have just as a sort
There's
of.
one
license
on-
for- Huh?
There's one on 680-34, it says receptacle should not be located less than
That's fine.
6 foot from the inside of the walls of a storage pool.
That's 5, what was it, 5 feet?
6 feet,
6 feet?
yes, sir.
This is 3 foot tall that's 5 feet from a pool. So it'd be within the 6 feet that you're talking about there. So is it saying that it has to have GCI protection if it's in that zone? Or is it saying you're not allowed to put it in there at all?
It's
680
not allowed to be
what?
put in there at all.
So you have, page 568, is that where you're at?
573.
572, that's gonna be too far. Under, nostril pull to 573, so your specialized full point speed requirement is,
Is it 410, 184, good, or goal for you?
no, that's gonna be, for like, pot growing. So if you look at, luminaires, lighting outlets and similar blah, 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 on page 568, that is a 5 foot or less water level. So it's installed in areas extending between 5 feet and 10 feet horizontally from the inside walls of the pool or protected by ground fault. Circuit interrupter unless installed not less than 5 feet above the maximum water level. That's under, number 4 at the top left-hand side of page 560A. There's luminaires, lighting outlets, and ceiling span pilot fans, receptacle, required location 6 feet from, not more than 20 feet from. Other receptacles, not less than 6 feet from the inside wall of the pool shall have, so, and then also, so if you look at 680.22, A, 3 or 4, one of those two looks like it's gonna get it. Cause it's receptacles for lighting, receptacles and equipment. And other receptacles, location shall be not less than 6 feet from the inside wall of the pool. GCI protection, if they're located within 20 feet, and, see, that's gonna be 20 feet. That's not gonna cover it either. They've gotta be outside, not more than 6 feet. Oh, I'm sorry, not less than 6 feet from them, so that would be, yeah, that's right. So I'm gonna say it's gonna be GCI protection under number 4 there, and it's a class A. Anybody know what the class A operating limits are? That's a separate test question, just in case. Anybody know what that is? Like what the trip limits are for a class A GCI? You know, there's a class A, there's a class C, but there's no class B. I think that's what it is. Anybody wouldn't, got a guess where you could find the answer to that? If you wanted to know what a trip time was for a class A GFCI device, where would you go to look for it in the code book? Huh? Where would you look for it? If the question's asking you for the trip time or the threshold for a class A GFCI device, where do you think you would go to look for it, for the answer?
Table of contents.
Who said that? I like you. It's a definition probably, right? There's a lot of stuff jammed in the definitions, that being one. I mean, class A would be something that, would be specific to me as a definition, and I think it's where it's at. Ground fault, circuit interrupter. I think it's branch circuit ground fault, but I don't remember. Yeah, so under G, page 36, and wouldn't hurt to highlight. It's on the right-hand side under ground fault circuit interrupter, GFCI, right-hand column toward the top, page 36. Informational note underneath that definition is where it's 6 milliamps or higher, but won't trip when it is less than 4 milliamps. And so a class A is not less than 4 amps and 6 milliamps or higher. Okay? Bless you.
Thank you.
And on page 38, before I forget, 38, on the right-hand column, at the bottom, on the right-hand side, overcurrent protected device, OPD, branch circuit, intended for use but not less than 5,000 amps. So overcurrent devices for branch circuit have interrupting ratings appropriate for the intended use but not less than 5,000 amps. Now 5,000 amps is that inrush current value for the interrupting rating, so it's much higher. It's a short circuit value than much higher than the thermal rating. So when we're looking at a breaker and you see the 20 amps on that handle, that's just the thermal limit of 20 amps, the amount of heat that 20 amps would draw or create. That's what that 20 amps means. But you can have a 20 amp breaker right next to another 20 amp breaker that could have two totally different values for the inrush current. So 5,000 being the minimum. And by the way, if they're anything other than 5,000, they have to be stamped with the value on the breaker. So if you have a breaker that doesn't have anything stamped on it, it's a 5,000 amp interrupting capacitor from AIC. 38, right into it. Most people will say 10,000 because that's what you see, but really, because if it's stamped, then it's going to be some other number higher than 5. 5,000 isn't required to be stamped, but it does need to be, but it has to be at least that amount according to this section there. Okay, and then qualified persons on page 39 on the right hand side, and I think that's probably good enough for us to move on. Let me talk to you real quickly about page 50. Working spaces. I just need to get this knocked out real fast. The dimensions for your working spaces, it doesn't really matter what the equipment type is, so don't let them kind of bait you with like a machine cabinet or I'm sorry, motor control cabinet. It doesn't really matter what it is. If it's an electrical panel, and we have rules as far as kind of where it needs to be placed. And so there's 4 dimensions you have to keep track of. You're like, wait a minute, I thought there's only 3. Well, we had 4. We've got the height. We've got the frontal distance. We've got the side to side. So I'm going to draw it like this so that you know that we're talking about working in front of it from side to side. And then you've got the headroom. Okay? So that's basically 4 different dimensions to keep track of. This, people get confused because you think that's frontal working distance or depth of the working distance. And they get that and then the side to side. So if I'm standing here in the panel right there, moving side to side freely in front of it is what they call it. So the frontal working clearance is actually the side to side, not the depth. The depth would be from here to whatever's behind me, directly behind me. The table that you see under 110.26A1 is the depth between opposite walls. So a panel on the wall facing another wall behind it, or maybe a piece of equipment like a transformer and a panel here. So that depth, based off this table, there's 3 rows. They just added the 601 to 1,000 recently, but it's either 0 to 150, 151 to 600, or 601 to 1,000. I would just real quickly, since you've got everything marked in feet, they're going to give it to you. I almost guarantee they're going to give it to you in inches, but it's fine. Remember, 3.5 inches is not 3.5 feet. All right, or 3.5 feet is 3 feet 6 inches, right? But 3 feet 5 inches is not half. So be careful. I always get that confused. 3 feet 6 inches or 3.5 feet is the same thing, right? All right. You'll notice that 0 to 150 is 3 feet across the board. You don't have to start worrying about it until the next row. So if I had a panel that was rated at 240 volts single phase, and I've got 120, on 120 240 volt, and it's on the wall right there, what that table does for us, if you're in row 1, 2, or 3, where would you be at with that panel? I used to think that, and I tried to apply the table that way for a long time, and somebody slapped me on the head and said, read the top of that first column. So this is phase to phase, right? But the nominal voltage to ground is this number. So 240 volt, 208 volt, single phase, three phase would all be under row 1 still, right? Because they're 120 volts nominal phase to ground. And trust me, I'm glad you said that, because that's really, I had misapplied that table for a long time because I'd argue with people, oh, you gotta have it at 4 feet. No, you don't. It's 3 feet. If it's 120, now if you go to a 480 volt panel with a 277 volt to ground, then you're in row 2, right? So in this case, this would be 36 inches no matter what this wall is, right? When you get to a 480 volt, 277, then you're in the second row, and that's where what matters is that this distance increases based on the risk of electrocution or shock based on what's behind you, right? If I'm working on this panel over here and it's energized, and this wall over here is insulated, if I accidentally touch it, I might not have a shock at all, because it would be, you know, if I've got rubber boots on and I'm touching a wall that's insulated, it probably wouldn't be a path for it to follow, right? But it increases my risk if this is grounded, right? If it's grounded and I accidentally touch it and my hand's on the bus bar, that's probably not gonna be a good day. So that's why we have a little bit more of an increase. Condition 1, 2, and 3 are based on insulated, grounded, which is a higher risk level, or exposed live parts on both sides, with or without the panel's covers installed. It's still in exposed live parts. And that's of course the highest risk of all of them, and that's condition 3. So think about it like that. The more risk that is behind you, the more that distance grows for your higher voltage panels. It's either 3 feet, 3.5, or 4 feet, depending on which one of those conditions you're in. They specifically mark under condition number 2, they list concrete, brick, tile walls are all considered to be grounded. Gypsum, wallboard, things of that nature would be insulated, so you don't have to worry about that, but a tile wall, any kind of a concrete wall would be considered a grounded surface. In the condition 3, exposed live parts with or without the covers measured from the actual exposed part itself, not from the outside edge of the equipment. So when you're talking about that 4 feet there, it's right here to right here would be the measurement that we take to measure that. So it's actually probably a little bit more than 4 feet if you think about the edge of the panel being.
So when you have to cover it off, you have to cover on both sides.
That's right.
The panel, then you want that 4 feet behind.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Or that 4 feet.
4 feet or 5 feet, depending on what the voltage is, but, yeah, I haven't really worked on anything 601 to 1,000 volts yet, but maybe you guys have, I don't know. Okay, so that's basically your working space under, A, right? A1. And then A2, which is listed on, the right-hand side above the table where it says with the working space. That's the frontal working equipment, which I mentioned right here. So that's gonna be 30 inches or the width of the panel, whichever is greater. So if I have a panel that's 18 inches wide, then I still have to have 30 inches minimum, and that can be from the edge over, or it could be centered, or it could be from this edge back. I mean, you just have to have that 30 inches one way or the other, and you can overlap it with other panels, so as long as you have 30 inches for both, by the the time you're done with the measurement. However, you have to allow the covers to open 9 degrees with equipment doors or hinge panels, and that's the rules there, okay? So it's 30 inches or greater, depending on what the width of the panel is. This is 36 or greater, depending on what the condition 1, 2, or 3 is. And then finally, the height here, which is the third one in this group, has to do with the floor to the top of the equipment, or 6.5, is it? 6.5 feet. That's under number 3. So it's basically from here to here, which is 6.5 feet, or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. If you got an 8-foot tall piece of switchgear, then you gotta have an 8-foot height, okay? And then within that measurement, there's a rule that has to do with the extension of other equipment that's below or above it. So for example, if I had a panel here on the wall and it was on top of a gutter. This gutter cannot extend past the lip of this panel more than 6 inches. Or then it is in the working space of the panel above it, and it would have to move somewhere else, okay? So 6 inches from the edge of the panel to the edge of the gutter would be what we're talking about measuring. So how far it sticks out past the equipment that's above it or below it. 6 inches. Real common master's question that people can't find for some reason. It's kind of a weird spot, but I guess it makes sense. And then finally, the fourth dimension, which is the headroom, and that's on page 51 on the right-hand side. I'm gonna deny that this is in here, but it's indoor, dedicated equipment space, indoor, 6 feet above the equipment, or the structural ceiling, whichever is lower. That's the only one that allows you to be less than, but it's 6 feet, or the structural ceiling, whichever is lower, and they specify that a drop ceiling or suspended ceiling is not a structural ceiling, so it would be the deck above it, that we're talking about. So if you had a short building or someplace that had a hard deck that was only, let's say, 3 feet above the panel, that's okay, because it'd just be 3 feet of headroom that you'd have to have instead of 6. They also, there's a question to ask if can I run the AC piping or ducts through that dedicated space? No, heck no. My answer. I want to get that one wrong on the test just because I don't ever want to admit that it's okay, but it is okay technically. Just don't ever tell an AC guy that. If you look on page 51, right-hand column under 1 indoor B foreign systems, it is permitted to contain foreign system provided they've got some sort of protective wrap or some sort of drip pan or something of that nature. And that's on the right-hand side under E1B. Again, I would black that out with your highlighter or with a Sharpie after you're done with the exam so no AC guy ever sees it. Page 52. Article 100 is not, Article 110 is not that big, so I would suggest you probably just skim through almost the whole thing. However, I mean, just because I'm skipping a lot of stuff that I should stop and talk about, but we'd be here all day if I kept talking about all of it. But I wanted to point out the doors and floors and walls and roof of the electrical bulk. It's on the right-hand side, right-hand column of page 52 under 110.31A, 1 through 3. Put a note on the bottom where you got that space. Transformer room is 1 hour rating. Transformer vaults are 3 hours. So if I've got a requirement for a transformer room, a dedicated room for transformer, that's only a 1 hour fire rating requirement. If I've got a vault, it's a 3 hour fire rating equipment, or minimum rating. And then finally, the piece de resistance, the weight table 110.28, that nobody has any idea why it's here. But you'll see that on your test very likely. It's one that they love to ask because they know that nobody knows where it's at. So it's the ingress table for enclosures. They have to do whether it being an indoor or outdoor. So I'm on page 53, 110.28. I promise you're gonna forget where this table is the minute you move past it, so you're gonna have to remember mentally or put a note somewhere where this table is so you can find it again. Questions are gonna be, if you have this type of outdoor condition or this type of indoor condition, which one of the following ratings would you be permitted to use? And then it's the 3R, 4, 4X things, so on and so forth. Highlight the outdoor on the top and the indoor on the second set of columns so it kind of stands out to you. And then the thing that they don't really explain very well, to me an X means don't you dare, or I guess maybe it's a treasure, I guess. X is, if it's excellent for spot, that's not bad. But on a table like this, I would think that an X would mean don't use it. However, in this case, the X means you can use it, the dash means you cannot. So if you're looking for something that would be permitted, it needs to have an X, not a dash, right? And so I would probably put that at the top. X is okay, dash is not okay. That way you won't ever have to worry about remembering that. Again, you will forget where this table is. It's like I've got some magical spell on you guys, so you're gonna have to write yourself a note somewhere that tells you or reminds you where this table is, otherwise you won't find it again when you need it. Okay, doke. That's just all we're gonna talk about. There's some door questions. I will tell you that masters, you need to read page 56 and 57 to the nth detail. there's a question, you'll have a question on your test, not more than one, but it will come from part 5, manhole.
¿Qué puedes usar?
Say it again?
Oh, sí.
110.70 through 110.79, you just need to read the whole thing, it's not that, long, but you'll have a question that comes out of that, and I'm practically highlight the whole thing and, still probably not cover it all. Okay. Let's talk about wire ampacity. So since we're in 110, we're gonna start there. What do you mean wire ampacity? We're gonna start in 110. I thought 110 was like just general umbrella rules. I thought the ampacity table was on page 161, didn't it? Well, the answer to that, or why we're starting here in 110.14, is 110.14C for Charlie. Where did it go? Page 48, left-hand column. C says temperature limitation, and then 1 says equipment provisions, and then A has a pretty interesting rule. Let me get my slides up real quick and then we'll look at it. I don't know how to mess this up, but, yeah. We tend to think, if you think about what we do for a living, I know we're electricians, but really what we are is we're wiremen. And if you think about the one common core piece that ties everything that we do in our trade together is wire, right? I mean, we install quite a bit of wire, and the funny thing about that is, guys, is that you would think that because that's such an important piece that we'd have that down pat and understand better than really anybody. But the truth of the matter is, we don't really understand it very well at all. And I know that we don't understand it very well at all because I've seen my fair share of inspections. I'm a certified electrical inspector, and I've seen plenty of jobs that have conductors that are not correctly sized for what the service is, or branch circuits for that matter. So there's a lot of math, there's a lot of things that get people confused about it, but at the end of the day, this section right here really has to do with more about taking this test than it does in practical reality. Because when you're in front of a piece of equipment, you can check the rating of the terminal and see what it is, right? On a test though, you can't tell what a rating for a terminal is unless they give it to you, right? And so you gotta remember that we're gonna have 3 temperature groups. We're gonna have 60 degree, 75 degree, and 9 degree. This is in Celsius. Think about wire ampacity not really having anything to do with the wire ampacity at all. A number 10 wire is good for how many amps? 35 technically. We put the 30 amp breaker because that rule we talked about yesterday, but right, 30, 35 amps. That, I can tell you right now, number 10 wire will hold 100 amps all day long. And it doesn't do anything to that number 10. It's still number 10 when you're done with it. It doesn't hurt that wire. It takes like 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to melt a number 10 wire. I mean, you're not going to get that out of 100 amps or even 200 amps. It might turn red, it might get a little hot. But what we're really talking about is the heat that that wire puts on the outside surface as it's trying to cool off, and the thing that's wrapped around it is what we're really worried about. Wire ampacity's got nothing to do with ampacity of a conductor. It's got to do with the ability of the insulation around it to withstand the heat of that conductor so that it has enough room to dissipate it and it doesn't start to break down faster than what it would otherwise, right? So it's a lot more about insulation protection than it really is the wire itself. The wire, the ratio of its size to the amount of a current that it has is going to create that heat because the copper resistance level is a constant at certain temperatures. And so that's always going to be prevalent. But as electricians, wire is our core piece that we have. Heat is our biggest enemy. And heat with a wire or conductor really has an impact to the insulation rating, and that's what this is all about. So keeping that in mind, when we're looking at this 110.14C1A, basically the code book says, look guys, unless you can prove us otherwise, you have to assume anything that's a 14 og all the way up to a number 1, or basically anything less than 1 og, right? Anything that's 100 amps or less, your maximum allowance is a 60 degrees Celsius rating. Is that what it says? Practically, right? Now it does continue on. I think either 3 or 4 says, look, if the equipment has a rating higher than that, then you can use the higher rating. But if you don't know what that number is, 60 is all you got. That's a big rule. It's an important rule, and it's something you got to remember. Like for example, if I'm putting this insulation here under, no wait, I don't really even know what that is, guys. I've looked at that so many times and tried to figure out what in the heck they were trying to do with that, but I don't know. But it's sure gonna heat up that rod, whatever that is. I think it looks like a nail or something, right? Anybody got? I think I can't tell, but it looks like they have this white wire going down in there somewhere. Like a wire nut, but this is pretty impressive. The strap using the ground as a strap there. Again, when we're talking about wire ampacity, we're really talking about thermal protection of the jacket, really. All right. And with that, if you look in your textbook real quickly, let's talk about that jacket lettering system so you kind of understand what the letters mean. When we're talking about a THHN or THWN-2, all of those things should tell you a great deal about that conductor if you understand what the labeling means. One second, I'm gonna get to it here in just about a half second. Right, page 42. So the first letter in a jacket is typically the type of insulation, like it's the main core piece of insulation. So a T is a thermoplastic, flexible PVC is what it is. And so the T is just a thermoplastic. An R was a rubberized compound. A, back in the day, they had a lot of conductors that started with a letter A because it had asbestos in it. We don't have those anymore, but there was quite a few of them back in my day that had A's in them. And then X is a synthetic blend. And so that's kind of the core components of conductor insulators now. So it's R for rubber, T for thermoplastic, with basically thermal-resistant PVC. And then X is a synthetic blend of some sort of mix. And then after that, the 2 letters in the middle tell you the temperature rating. An H in a jacket tells you that it's rated for heat. Heat meaning it's rated for 75 degrees Celsius, right? So if it doesn't have an H, then it's a 60 degree rated. If it has an H, it's a 75 degree rated. And guess what a double H means?
90.
There you go. High heat is what that double H stood for. So a THH means that it's a thermoplastic, high heat, 90 degree rated conductor. And then the last letters are either the outer jacket or what it's rated for. In this case, the W stands for wet locations. An N stands for a nylon outer coating. So a THHN would be a 90 degree rated with a nylon outer jacket. But a THHN, if it doesn't have a W, can't be installed in a wet location, can it? W suffix is required for any installation that has wet locations in them. And so the wet location would be anything buried underground, period. I don't care what it is. If it's in the ground, in a conduit or direct buried, it is considered a wet location. It's under 300.5 in Article 300. If it's in a raceway that's directly exposed to the weather, that's a wet location, or the interior of the raceway is considered a wet location. The only time you could put it outside basically and not call it wet would be if it's in a damp location, like running under some eaves where it's not directly exposed to the weather. But if it's run on the rooftop or on the side of the building where the weather could actually, like the sun could beat on it, then that would be a wet location. And so practically trying to get a wire from anywhere outside a building, inside the building, you're going to go to a wet location one way or the other. So your feeders are practically all going to be something that ends in a W. The -2 is one other additional way of allowing for a 90 degree rating. And the reason for it is that the double H is not always 90, sometimes it's 75 because there's some jackets that are dual rated. And those can be 75 if it's a wet location, or if it's dry, then you can use the 90. And I'll explain more about that in just a second. But does that make sense? So the -2 is a 90, no matter what, no matter where I put it. Copper melts at 1,981 degrees Fahrenheit, just FYI. That's why, you know, like I said, that number 10 is not gonna get hurt with 100 amps. I had a job where I had failed my inspection because the main was supposed to be 22.5 AIC for the interrupting capacity, and I bought one of those home line panels that had the bolted in main breaker, and it was rated for 10K. And so the utility company failed me, passed all my city inspections, but I failed the the loss energy deal. And so everybody's mad because they're talking about moving in that weekend, and I couldn't get my final inspection. And you can't just go pick up one of those off the shelf because it's bolted in. You got to unbolt it and get another kit from. God, I think it had to come from Belize or Mexico, Honduras, someplace way down there. And it took me about 6 weeks to get it. I was not going to be the one that was going to take the flak, so I took a number 10-3 and I ran it from my skid panel, a temporary panel in the front, ran it across the front yard, backed that into the panel, and everything was cool. Turned on the power. I promise you, must have had 100 amps on that thing because it was a 200 amp service, and that thing was running. It was middle of summer, and they were moving in, so the doors open, the AC on, full blast. And for 6 weeks it worked just fine. It never did anything to hurt that number 10. But that Romex jacket, when I rolled it up, you could hear it cracking. It was toast. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the number 10. We're talking about that jacket and the amount of heat that I put on that thing. Basically made it worthless, right? I could never use it anywhere else, maybe for the same thing, but just temporarily. So remember, heat's our enemy. It's also the terminal, right? Everything that you have to look at wire as a installed component. Otherwise, it's got no value, right? If I don't have wire connected to something, then it doesn't have any use at all. It's just a paperweight. So I don't really care what a wire insulation rating is, because if I'm just talking about that, I'm talking about it sitting on a shelf. But the minute I take it off the shelf and actually install it, well then whatever I install it to, and then anything else connected in that branch circuit, whatever the lowest temperature rating of anything in that branch circuit is, becomes the highest temperature rating for everything connected to it. Does that make sense? So it's like the weakest link if you think about it from that perspective. I could have a wire that's rated for 2,000 degrees Celsius. Doesn't matter a bit of difference, because when I put it on a breaker that's rated for 60 degrees Celsius, that automatically makes that wire a 60 degree rated Celsius conductor. Does that make sense? So that's something you got to be very careful of. The wire jacket and the rating of the wire is helpful at the beginning of your calculation, but at the end, you cannot ever forget that rule that we just looked at in 110.14c, which is if it's a small conductor, anything 100 amps or less, sized as a number 1 all the way down to 14 gauge, 16, 18 also included, those conductors cannot be more than 60 degrees Celsius when you're done with your math, period. Unless you can check and verify that everything in that branch circuit is rated for 75 degrees. But if you don't have that information given to you, you can't assume it, okay? It's a big rule. And again, like I said, the terminations are where you get in trouble. Practically everything that you have in the trade is gonna have a rating on it marked in Celsius. And again, if that one connection right there, obviously that's pretty hot. Heats up and overheats, then that's what we're trying to limit the whole branch circuit to. Breakers have a rating of either 60 or 75 degrees. Wire nuts, mechanical lugs, fuse connectors, terminations, motor pecker heads, motor leads, wire nuts, everything that you put wire together and you compress it or screw it down or bind it down, all of it has a rating from a manufacturer that says at this degree temperature, at this size conductor, this is the most ampacity you can carry through this terminal without damaging the plastic around it or whatever, right? And so whatever the lowest value in anything in that branch circuit is, becomes the highest value for everything connected to it. I'll tell you that one thing that what I've never seen as a professional electrician is I've never seen a terminal rated for 9 degrees, ever. Even if I did see one, everything else in the branch circuit would also have to be rated for 9 degrees. And a long time ago, manufacturers realized that there's not that much of a gain from the 75 to the 9 degree columns in ampacity. It's really not that big of a gain for the amount of additional manufacturing costs that it would take to make everything rated for 9 degrees. So they threw it out the window. Manufacturers make things rated for 60 or 75. That's what you're gonna see, right? And you're scratching your head going, well, why the hell do we have 9 rated columns in the wire ampacity? Well, it's because we have to have a place to start so that our math doesn't hit us so hard when we're working through it. And the math, depending on what the condition is, could be pretty favorable or not, depending on how hot it is and some other factors. But at the end of the day, you can't forget the rating of the terminal. That's the one thing I want you to remember. You cannot forget at the end of your math to go back and make sure you're either at 6 degrees Celsius if you don't know what the terminal is rated for, and you've got wire that's rated to 100 amps or less, number 1 or to a 14 gauge, or if you have a question that tells you the terminal is rated for 75 degrees Celsius, well then you're allowed to use that value, but you have to be given it, so you can't verify it for yourself. Now in the field you can verify it yourself. I mean, practically nowadays everything's rated for 75. I think the only 60 degrees I really see very often are going to be some like terminal control transformers, the little contactors. Those sometimes have 6 degree rated terminals, but anyway, all right. So the weakest link is the maximum value for everything connected. Otherwise, like I said, a wire sitting on a shelf doesn't really matter what its insulation rating is. It's not a value that matters until you connect it. And once you connect it, then you got to take everything into account. Wire ampacity's got 3 different things that we worry about, and all of them really have to do with, well, the adjustments both have to do with heat. So we have a core ampacity, right? When you have a question asking you for ampacity of a conductor, the first challenge you have is you got to figure out where you're going to start at, right? You're going to look at 3 things, and I passed out a handout to y'all yesterday. There was a copy of my own page 161. If you'll pull that out, I want you to ultimately put everything that I have on that page on your own, but I want you to understand what my notes meant when I put that together. It's just a single page, I think. Yeah, right there. That's probably one second. Should look like this right here. It's got a color copy of page 161. You can either start marking all of that copy on your own code book, or this is a single page, so it should be. There you go. If you didn't get it, you probably had the what do you call it, the economy version of the class. Discount rate. Everybody found theirs? All right. You don't have to mark it all down now. It's probably best if you just kind of listen and follow along. But the first thing you're going to notice, what I have written on there, is there's 3 things that I have written down at the bottom. And those 3 things are my roadmap every single time I use this table. I still to this day, those are the 3 things I ask myself every single time. Because I need to know, do I start with a 90, do I start with a 75, or do I start with a 60, right? I mean, it's kind of a critical thing to determine right up front. So the 3 things are going to be, number 1, is the wire itself rated for 90 degrees? You think, well, why does that matter? Well, if it's only rated for 75 degrees, like for example, a THW, right? A THW is a thermoplastic, heat resistant, allowed to be installed in a wet location. And that heat, or that H, means that it's only got a 75 degree rated value. So if I have a THW, that is only equal to 75 degrees Celsius, which means I cannot use the 90 degree column to start with that conductor because it isn't rated for 90 to begin with. If I had a THW-2, isn't there a THW-2 under the 90 degree column? I think so, right? THW-2, remember that -2 is a way for the manufacturer to convey that they've added something to the material of that now makes it a high heat rated in wet or dry locations. So that then becomes a 90 degree rated conductor. And then that tells me, okay, well, if I've got that insulation that's ready for that, that's yes to that first question, right? All right, so far I'm tracking. That -2, we're good, we're gonna stay in the 90. The second question I ask myself is, do I have derating factors to apply? Look at what I wrote in the 90 degree column in black ink with the red underlining. What does that say? The 90 degree column has only one purpose in your life, and that is only to serve as a starting point for math to be applied to it. Again, I'll say that one more time. I have to be at or below either the 75 or the 60, depending on the wire size or whatever the terminal ratings are, right? A lot of times I'm going to be required to be at the 6 degree column. And so that's the end of the math, because I have to make sure that after I apply all the derating factors, I need to know where that number, that calculated value is, so I can see if I'm above or below. And sometimes my calculated value is not quite at the 75 degree value, and so I end up having to bump it down to 75 because I can't be more than the 75 degree when it's all said and done, right? I could have, like, for example, I could have a larger conductor. Let's say we had a 350. 350 is good for 350 amps, right? 900 column. So I had a 350 KC mill THW-2. Everybody agrees that that is a 900 end conductor because of the -2, right? If I had nothing else in the question, no other derating factors taken into account, the answer to that question would be simply, it's rated for a value that's 310 amps. So it automatically have to bump this 390, 390 amps is what it's 390, right? In the 900 column? Or what is it on the 90? Oh, 350, it's 350? In the 90, okay. Alright, so it's 350 amps, right, on the 900 column. That number doesn't mean anything to me if I don't have any math to apply, because I'm automatically can't use anything more than the 75-degree rated terminal value, right? Because I'm gonna land that on a breaker or somewhere that's rated for 75. The minute I do that, that becomes the threshold for that wire. So that 350 doesn't mean anything to me if I don't have derating effects, because that's automatically gonna make it 310 amps, even if I don't have any derating factors to take into account, right? I can't use a value higher than, that red line that I have to the right side of that 75 is meant to be a glass ceiling. Don't ever give an answer larger than the amount that you see on the left-hand side of that red line. If you go past that red line, you're in the wrong territory as a final answer, because I can't be more than that terminal rating, right? So if I were to do math, it gets me, let's say it was 91% or something like that, and I did the math, it came out to be 315 amps, right? That would not be enough to get me where I need to be here, which means I'm automatically gonna have to start, I'm shoving it down to 310 amps no matter what I do, right? So be careful of that. The 900 has to be derated. You have to have multiplications to do with it, or it doesn't even exist. You might as well just start with the 7,500 column and be done with it, right? All right, there's that part. Well, what are the derating factors that we have to consider? Two things. How many other hot bodies do I have in the same room? Because when you put a bunch of sweaty people into a small room without circulation, what happens? It just gets hotter and hotter and hotter, doesn't it? And so wires the same way. When you group them together and bundle them in an enclosed space where they can't evaporate the heat off of them, they start to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And so the number of hot people in a room, or number of current carrying conductors carrying current, create heat. And when they're all bundled together, that heat kind of multiplies, so you have to have enough space in there for them to dissipate. So heat buildup for the number of current conductors is one of them. And the other one, which is kind of like that. You think that's 60-degree fill or 40%? I'm not 60. I'm sorry, 60% fill or 40% fill?
80.
That's a lot of wire. I think those are probably. That's probably 3/4 inch. That's a half inch. That's 3/4. You think? Anyway, that's a lot of. That's right. That's exactly right. No.
Just because it fits doesn't mean it's right. But.
So here's the thing. We talked about the wire impasse or the conduit fill yesterday, and we were getting some big numbers, right? The derating factor for the thermal impact of having a bunch of wires like that in the same pipe limits the number of wires you can put in any size pipe because of the thermal effect of it, right? We are going to derate the ampacity of the conductors when they're bundled together like that, when there's anything more than 3. This table right here gives you 3 of them for free, but anything more than 3, every number on this table has to be derated somehow or another, right? So that's the first thing that we derate for. The second thing is, it's called an ambient temperature, right? Anybody know what the ambient temperature for the city of Austin is? Anybody? Really? How many guys have installed conductors outside of a building in Austin? Or this is in Austin, Houston. I'm sorry, Houston. How many of y'all like outdoor installs? Yeah, no? Conduit on the side of the building? You're the only one in this whole room. Yeah.
I'm the only one
All
working.
you guys are lying. I can tell you that right now. Y'all don't want to answer because you know what the answer is, but I got it. Okay, I'm not gonna throw you out in front of the street. When I used to do this, if you install stuff outside a building, that heat of the outside of that building has got to be taken into account because it will affect the performance of that insulator, right? And so ambient temperature has to be taken into account. And this book was written by guys that live in Massachusetts. I don't know about them, but 86 degrees Fahrenheit is what this table is based off of. At the bottom of the table, it tells you they're based on 86 degrees Fahrenheit. For me, I wish I lived in a state that had 86 degrees Fahrenheit as its mean ambient temperature. I mean, that'd be a nice, cool day for us, right? It is 99 degrees, wet bulb temperature at Houston, George Bush, in the ASHRAE Book of Standards, has it listed at 99 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what your ambient temperature is. Now, if they don't tell you that on the test, don't worry about it, but I'm just telling you as an electrician, if you're installing stuff outside of the building in Houston, Texas, 99 degrees Fahrenheit is your ambient temperature.
What about Austin?
Austin's 98,
Oh, West Texas.
Dallas is 97. It's 1 degree temperature as you go up the state, basically.
115.
Ooh, man, it gets a lot, it gets a lot worse. Well, but here's the thing, guys. That heat has an effect on the performance of an insulator, and you guys know what I'm talking about. If you pull wire out of a rooftop install and it's all blanched and looks like it's all pastel colored wire, you know it didn't look like that when you got installed, and it's just that heat, right? So here we go. Those two things are listed down there at the bottom of the page anyway. But my second one there is that I must have the rating factors to apply, which is the whole point of starting all this thing, which the two rating facts that I have highlighted down there, I've got 2 page numbers next to the first 1 and 2, and I want you to put those page numbers for sure next to your notes at the bottom of your page, because that's the 2 D-rating tables that we're going to take into account. So I've got page 159 and 160, notes 1 and 2 respectively. Okay? Remember, guys, you must protect the terminator. At the end of the day, what you terminate that wire to, what that rating is really critical that you keep that in mind. We start with whatever the highest rating that we can start with, which is the point of going through these 3 questions down here. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we're either at or below either the 75 or the 60. What is the 60 rules again? Anything 100 amps or less, 14 gauge through number 1, that's a small conductor, or actually bigger than the small conductor, but it's the smaller wire size. We'll call it branch, if you will. That's basically all your branch conductors are going to fall in that range. You can't assume a 75 degree rating for a terminal with any wire in that class. You can't assume it. You have to be told by a test question what that terminal rating is, or you're stuck with the 60 degree column, okay? That's something that's going to be hard for you to do because you're not used to using that 60 degree column for THWN in a commercial building, put it into PCMT. We're just not used to doing that, right? But you can't, on a test, artificially look at everything to verify what it is, and so the code book says, look, if you don't know what it is, that's all you get. But that's at the end of the equation. I start with the highest I can, do whatever math there is to do, and then I have to use that as a final check valve to make sure I'm not violating either the 75 or the 60 degree column. All right. And then the third question I have on the bottom there is going to be, is it a wet or dry location? And the reason for that is if you look at the top of the notes that I have at the top, you'll notice that I have wet under the top of the 75 degree column, and I've got dry written on top of the 90 degree column, right? So that's wet or dry. You'll notice that I've got highlighted, I think, 3 different conductors there that are under both the 75 and the 90 degree column. And the reason why they're under both is because those 3 conductor types are dual rated. They all have W's, and it all has to do with whether or not you install them or wet. You can or you can't. Now, for example, XHHW, right? XHHW is one of those that's listed in both the columns, right? 75 and the 90. The reason why it's listed that way is because the W says, look, this is a jacket that can be installed in a wet location. But because of the fact that that wet location traps heat, if you install it in a wet location, it automatically makes it the same as an XHW. In other words, it's no longer a 90 degree rated conductor, it's a 75 degree rated conductor to begin with. You'll see that if you look at the table listed up there, which is table 310.4a. Let's look at that real quickly. 310.4a is just a couple pages backwards from where you're at on page 161. Let's see here. Thank you, sir. Let's look at page 154 real quick. That's where that XHHW I'm talking about, just as a reference. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different installation types that start with an XH or some variation of it on page 154. In that second column, you'll see XHH at the top. XHH is rated for 9 degrees if you look at the third column next to it, but it only is allowed in a wet or damp location, so the W is not there You couldn't put it outside a building if you wanted to. Now the XHHW, which is 3 down from that one, or 2 down from that one, notice how it's got a W, so that means I can put it in a wet location, and to the right it says 90 and 75. That's the dual rating, that's where it's split. And if you look to the right of that, you'll notice the dry or damp are rated for 90 and wet is rated for 75. So that's kind of what those notes that I put down here at the top up here are meaning to convey to myself is, hey, by the way, don't forget that if this conductor, this one, or this one, any one of those 3 is listed here, if I have a wet location given to me as a condition of the question, that automatically strips the 90 degree out of my tool kit, so to speak, and I'm stuck with a 75 as a starting point for anything to be applied to after that. Okay? So it's rated for 90 if it's one of those 3 and if it's not in a wet location. So the 3 questions. Number 1, do I have wire insulated rated for 90 degrees? Yes or no? Do I have the derating factors to apply? Yes or no? And finally, is it a wet location? For only those that are dual rated. If it's got a -2, I don't worry about that 3rd question because the -2 takes that out of my work. The -2 is always rated for 90 no matter whether it's wet or dry. So an XHHW-2 is a 90 degree rated conductor no matter where I put it. I'm good with that. I don't have to worry about that last question. But I ask myself those same 3 questions every single time because those are the 3 things that I have to really make sure that I've got present before I use the 90 degree column as a starting point. If I have all 3 of those yes, or 2 of those yes, with the 3rd one not even being present or being concerned, I'm good to go. I'm going to use the 90 degree column as a starting point for my math, right? Now let's talk about the math. Number 1, let's go back to page 161. At the bottom we have the first one which says 86 degrees Fahrenheit, is that the one, or what is that one? Yeah, okay, ambient temperature. So remembering that these guys that put this table together, this table is based on an 86 degree Fahrenheit ambient temperature. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't seen that many days in August or June or July around here that are that temperature, which means you're effectively gonna have to derate this table every single time you use it in the city of Houston, right? 86 degrees Fahrenheit, I've got a note to see page 159, and so let's go back to page 159. First thing I want you to do is I want you to take that great big table at the bottom of the page and put a great big X to it because I don't want you to ever accidentally use it. The bottom table, the larger table, looks nice and easy and very alluring. Don't use it. It does not go with the table that's on page 161. It goes with a different table we don't really use very often, so good enough. All right, the table at the top though, for years they've been trying to force the metric system down our throat and they're just about there. I mean, I feel like I'm about to start talking about kilometers and meters, but not until I die are they gonna force me. But what they've done is they've forced our measurements to be the last thing in the code book, and this table is a great example of it. The Fahrenheit, ambient temperature expressed in Fahrenheit, is the last column. So you're gonna have to read this backwards, all right? Sorry, it's just the way it is. Now, that's the ambient temperature, right? That's our temperature surrounding the installation, but the 90, the 75, and the 60 are the insulation rating, and don't get those confused because if you have a 9 degree ambient temperature and a 9 degree Celsius conductor, it can get kind of confusing. But those 3 columns, if you start under the 9 degree column on the table on page 161, you're going to stay in the 9 degree column when you come over here to get the derating factor. If I can't start with a 90 over here for some reason, I start with a 75, then I'm going to use a 75 degree table here. I can't jump lanes. I've got to make sure that I'm in the same temperature rating column here as where I'm pulling the ampacity off of the other tables. Make sense? So for example, that 350 kc mil XHHW-2, I gave you as an example a minute ago. 350, or THHW, but anyway, 350 kc mil rated as XHHW-2. That's a 9 grade conductor. I don't have to worry about anything as long as I have derating factors to take into account, as long as I have, well, that's really it. Ambient temperature higher than 86 degrees, which we have at 99 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to start with the value that's in the 9 degree column on page 161, which you told me was 350 amps, right? Correct?
Yes.
So I got 99 degrees Fahrenheit, ambient temperature in Houston, Texas. So I'm going to go over here to this table, look at the last column there. Falls between 96 and 104, and I'm going to pull the derating factor out of the 9 degrees Celsius rated conductor column at 91%. That's a multiplier of 91% of whatever that ampacity is right here. So, and I said that, I wrote that up there earlier just as a random guess, but it was right.
What
Anyway,
table was the second
I'm
one?
gonna take this 99 degrees Fahrenheit, it's gonna give me a value on the row under the 90 degrees Celsius column. Remember, I took this off the 90 degrees Celsius column, that's where that 350 came off of. So I'm gonna use that same column, the 90 degree column here, to get a multiplier of 0.91. So 350 times 0.91 is what? 318? 318.5 amps. So how this works is I'm gonna then stop, I'm gonna go back and look in the 75 degree column, and whichever number's lower, my calculated value or the 75 degree column is gonna become the maximum capacity of that conductor. Does that make sense? This number is higher than the 75 degree column, then I didn't quite get there yet, and I have to automatically push it down. So go back to the 75 degree column, page 161, and tell me what is it rated for. 350 kc mil, 75 degree column, what's the maximum capacity of it?
310.
Huh?
310.
There you go. This answer right here would probably be up there. They'd probably give you here's what way they would do that. They'd probably give you 319 amps, they'd give you 318 amps, they'd give you 350 amps, and they'd give you 310 amps, right? 310 amps is the maximum capacity of that conductor. Let me rephrase that. 310 amps is the maximum capacity of that terminal, right? And because of that fact, I can't worry about that 318 anymore. It's a 310 amp rated conductor. The weakest link in the chain. I gotta keep saying that so you won't forget that piece, but this is gonna have to be pushed down because I can't be more than the 75 degree column at the end of the calculation.
From what table do you got the 0.91?
It's on page 159. It's the table on the top of the page. So, like I said, the last column is the ambient temperature in Fahrenheit. So 99 degrees Fahrenheit would kind of give you the right row. And then the very first, or the one just to the, I guess to the left of it, would be the 90 degrees Celsius column. And because I started with 90 degrees Celsius with this 350, I'm gonna use that 90 degree column and pull the derated factor, which is 91%. Okay, that makes perfect sense, right? So you're not quite hot enough, just that factor alone isn't gonna get you there, you're gonna have to end up dropping it down. So if that was a question was given to me, because this wire is more than 100 amps, right? Remember the other rule that we had was that 6 degree column, but we don't have to worry about it with a wire this high or this big because it's way over that limitation. So we're staying with the 75 as the maximum value. Now, let's see here. Do I have anything else to say about that? Yes, I do. All right, so that's the ambient temperature. The other thing to remember, if you go back to page 161, note 2 at the bottom of the page where I told you, let's see page 160, has to do with current carrying conductors. Let's talk about a current carrying conductor real quick. What's a current carrying conductor? What color is a current carrying conductor? Just give me an example.
Black, gray.
Who said white and gray? That current carrying conductor?
Well,
You sure?
on the ground, it's.
Let me tell you something. I was doing a panel change out one day.
120 coming, it carries current.
I was doing a panel change out one day, and what I'd done was it was a 200 amp service, it burned up, pulled the panel off, put the new one on, starting to get dark. People were trying to come back and go back home and get the kids ready for school the next day. House is dark. I'm doing my best to light up everything as I go along. I had all the neutrals fanned out over here. I had all the phase conductors fanned out over here, and I'm landing on breakers one at a time, matching the grounded conductor with each one of the phase conductors. And sure enough, I messed up somehow, and I guess I wasn't paying attention, and I grabbed the wrong conductor where the white wire was over here in the bunch next to it, and I was having to use my body to kind of keep it out of the way so it wouldn't like slam into the panel, right? So I'm over here with all these white wires touching the side of my, and I've been soaking sweating. I was so wet. My entire shirt was just a puddle, right? I landed a breaker on and turned it on. It lit me up like fire. That white wire carries a full load. If it's only got one black wire out there, every bit of what goes that way has to come back. It's like an enclosed pipeline, right? It's how electricity works. It has to have a closed circuit. That white wire is a current carrying conductor, let me tell you. Now, if you have two phase conductors, two A and a B, or B and a C, or A and C, then it becomes a neutral. And neutrals only carry the difference between the two legs. So if I had 10 amps on A and 5 amps on B, for example, then I'm only going to see 5 amps on the neutral. When that happens, I don't have to worry about it because it doesn't create the same amount of heat as the phase conductors do, right? So if I had a 12-3 Romex, where I've got a black, a red, a white, and a bear, right? 4 wires, but they only count the 3 that are insulated. That would be 2 character conductors, because I've got a red and a black. The white wire is the common conductor between the two, so it's truly a neutral. So if I have 20 amps on one and 5 amps on the other, I only see 15 amps on the white wire because it's the net difference. It's not the same amount of heat, they allow me not to have to count it, okay? If I had a 12-2 with a black, a white, and a green, or a bear, that 12-2 would also be 2 current conductors, because then I've got the full load on A, and then every bit of it on the white wire coming back. So a single phase 120 volt wire that goes from a breaker here out to a receptacle, actually goes over here to the brass, and then comes back over here with that white wire going to your terminal bar. Both of those are current conductors. It'd be 2. And if I had 6 of them bundled together, then I'd have 12 current conductors in that bundle. You see where I'm coming from? Now, if I break the tab over here and I run another breaker and I bring them down over here where they're sharing that neutral, then if this is 10 amps, that's going to be 5 amps. That's going to only be the net difference between the 2 phases, and that will not be counted. It'll be 2 current conductors as well, but I'm only going to count the 2 colored conductor, 2 phase conductors in that case. Okay? All right. Hope that helps you understand when we're talking about 3 current conductors is what this table gives you. Anything more than that, the table you see on page 160 is what we start derating for the additional conductors. If I have more than 3, less than, or 6 or less, which is 4 to 6, which is that top value on that table. Oh, I'm sorry, in the wrong direction. Right there. 310.15 C1. They change those all the time. 310.15 C1. 4 to 6 is pretty common. You know, got a couple of circuits going out, coming back with a couple of white wires in the pipe, ground wire. You see, really easy to get 6 current conductors, knowing these rules here. So I've got 6 of them. I'm going to end up taking 80%. Sorry, right? 80%. If I hit 7 to 9, it's a 70% derating factor. So I can still recover from that. You put that 10th current conductor in that pipe, you're changing gear, and then you're not going to take a 50% derating factor and not have to change a breaker out, right? This table right here is why the conduit fill table is ridiculous anyway, because you can't ever get more than 10 current conductors in a pipe anyway. You hit that 10th one, you just derated half of the ampacity of every wire in the pipe. Now I don't care. I've had people ask me. You know, we used to do some SAM clubs, and SAMs have a lot of stuff all this gear panels and stuff in the back, and a lot of circuits in the front. So you got a long way to run some of that stuff. And it's nice to want to consolidate it to save yourself some time and only run one conduit for 15 different circuits, but you can't. I mean, you got 9 current conductors, and so if I have a full boat, an A, a B, a C, and an N, that's a neutral, and I don't have to count it, right? But I've got 3 current conductors there. I've got 4 wires. I've got 3 of them that carry current. I've got another ABC and an N, and another ABC and an N, and that's it. I don't care however big the pipe is. That could be a 2-inch pipe. That's the most I'm ever going to be able to fit in it, right there. Those 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 conductors. That's it. Conduit feels kind of silly then, isn't it? That's really the limit they have to worry about. All right. You have to try to stay at that, 7 to 9 at the worst case, because if you have an ambient temperature on top of this, that 7 or 9 might even be suspect, to be honest. All right, does that make sense how we're doing this, or why we're worried about it? Is it going to burn anybody's house down? No. But the thing is that you got to remember that we're trying to do effective installations that are problem and error free, and so this is part of that calculation, and it's a really important part. Is it going to change the way you install stuff right now in the field and make you do different things? Absolutely, because you guys are probably screwing this up every day when you put a pipe into a wire into a pipe. And I'm not being mean, because I was in the same shoes until I finally understood, oh wow, I've been doing that wrong all these years. I've learned every lesson I've ever learned as an electrician the hardest way possible. I learned this one on a big project in Georgetown, the university up there in Georgetown, Texas. I had a foreman that, and I didn't even think to check it, to be honest. He had, I think, 13 current conductors in every one of his 1-inch home runs, and we were done. This was a lead job. The ceiling grid was already done. You couldn't even move a forklift in there or a Skylift, what is those things?
Scissor lift.
Thank you, couldn't drive a scissor, can't even say it. Scissor lift anymore. We had to pull out every bit of wire that we had done, and we had to do it from ladders because we couldn't get anything else up in that with a grid up there. That late in the game because our engineering group walked through there, and one of those engineers goes, "Oh, how many wires are in that pipe that are currently?" It's just a nightmare.
So the maximum is 9.
9.
Okay.
Anything more than that, you're derating so deeply, you're gonna have to change your breakers to be at half whatever it was before.
And how do you fix that? Add another raceway? Couple more raceways?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's the only way to do it. And you can't just pull out 1 or 2 wires, and they wouldn't let us just cut them. The ones that we weren't gonna use and reinstall, they wanted them all pulled out, and I mean, they kinda had the right to do that. But when I'm telling you, I saw that pile of wire on the outside of the job, it was sickening. It was the biggest waste of time, money, effort. I mean, oof. I'm not gonna make that mistake twice again. So that 9 current conductors, and you can see how easy that is to get there. Now, if you have, by the way, if I didn't have this one right here, I had 2 full boats and then I had an A and a dedicated white wire that only went with A and a B with an N. How many current conductors do I have now? 10. So there you go. Be careful of those individual circuits that are 120 volt. They can certainly add up quick. All right, let's do some examples. Now that you understand all of this, find the maximum capacity of a number 8 XHHW were installed in a dryer damp location. I want to give you a hint. It's a trick question. My first question would be, number 1, is that rated for 9 degrees on the installation? Check, right? Number 2, do I have any derating factors to take into account?
Less than 100 amps.
And what is the first thing we learned earlier today? 110.C4A told you what? Very first thing we read before we even started anything was that you have a maximum of
60 degrees.
Thank you. Small conductor rules. Not small conductor rule. Basically, the branch circuit rule. If I don't know the terminal rating, which there's nothing in here that tells me anything about the terminal rating, right? That wire and its rating has diddly squat to do with it because it's the terminal now I'm worried about at the end. There's no math to do here, right? So I have no choice but to look at either the 75 or the 60. I don't know what the terminal rating is. That's a wire that's within that class of sizing 100 amps or less, 1 down to 14 gauge. That is a 40 amp rated conductor.
All the way.
Bam, right? That answers 40 amps without doing any math because there is no other choice. I'm stuck with a 6-degree column as a maximum capacity because of the code book that says that's what it is. Okay? That's a really simple question too, and it'd be real easy to try to look at that and say 50 amps because I do 50 amps on number 8 all the time. That is, that's what, I mean, if I'm putting number 8 in a conduit in a commercial building, I'm not putting it on a 40 amp breaker, I'm putting it on a 50 amp, right? And that's what the rating for it is in 700 column, we use that all the time. But it isn't rated for 50 amps if I don't know the rating of the terminals of the breakers. If for whatever reason on this test, they decided that they didn't want to tell me that, I can't add that to the test question, so it is a 40 amp rated wire. Maximum capacity number 8, XHHW installed in dryer damp location where the terminal is rated for 75 degrees Celsius. Bam. There we go. That's the only difference between those 2 questions is they now gave me that piece of information that I needed to have to be able to bump that up. But it still doesn't change the fact that it's still going to be a maximum of 50 amps because there's no math to apply, there's nothing else to do. Maximum capacity of that conductor in a 75 degree rated terminal would then be 50 amps. Still no math, right? So those are pretty easy questions. Now let's talk about getting into the weeds with it. So number 8, XHHW, where installed in a dryer damp location along with 3 other current conductors. It doesn't say 3 other similar characteristics. It says this wire plus 3 other ones that are current conductors. So they're telling you there's 3. And an ambient temperature of 105 degrees Fahrenheit. What's the impedance of that conductor? Well, the first thing I ask myself is this rated for 9 degrees? Yes, because we have derating factors to take into account, right? So I'm sorry, the insulation is rated for 9 degrees. Do we have derating factors taken into account? Yes. Finally, is it a dryer or wet? Is it a wet location? And the answer to that is no. It's dryer damp. That's fine. Damp is not the same as wet when it comes to this, so it has to be a wet location for it to knock me down to 75. I'm good with the 9 degree column. The 9 degree column for number 8 is 55 amps, right? So after I ask myself those 3 questions, I come over here and go, okay, I'm going to start with 55 amps because that's what that wire is rated for. But I have to take the derating factors into account, which are gonna be possibly this, and definitely this. This question would then be, is there 4 or are there 3? The way this is worded, they intended for them to say that this one by itself is not part of the group that are this 3. If they did, they would have said along with 3 other similar characteristics or some other wording that kind of give you a clue that they're all the same. But there's 4 wires in there, but only 3 of them for sure you know are current conductors. So we're going to skip the table that's on page 160. So what do you have for a 105 degrees Fahrenheit under which column on page 159? Ambient temperature. Page 159. So we're using 0.87 or we're using 0.82? 105 is it? 105. And you, so you're using the 9 column because? Yep, that's right. What is it, 87%? So we'll take that 55 amps and multiply it times 47.8. Do I know what the terminal's rated for? I don't, do I? Yeah. Don't forget that.
So on
Don't
that one,
forget that.
so on that one, you multiply the amperage.
The 55
With the-
amps, which we started out with 55 amps, we got that out of the 9 degree column because everything that we asked ourselves, all that came back, yep, we're good.
Okay.
Right.
And that's how you get that 55 to
Yep,
multiply
that's,
it.
it comes out of the 9 degree column. And we started with that, and then we went to the derating table on page 159. And under the 9 degree column there, the derating factor for that ambient temperature was 82%? 87%.
That's all a waste of time if we go back to the 60 degree column.
Not necessarily. I mean, it could be that after you're doing the derating, you would be below that 6 degree column, and if you are, then that would become the maximum capacity, and that's why it's kind of necessary to do this. I mean, you'll get it, after a while, you'll get used to seeing it and can kind of feel for it, but at 55 amps, at 87%, that wires, then our calculated value becomes 47.8 amps. And by the way, this does not get rounded up if I'm doing any rounding, because that's a maximum ampacity, right? If I'm doing any round at all, I'm rounding it down. But one way or the other, 47.8 amps maximum. Go back now and say, well, do I know what the terminal rating is? No, I don't. Which means that this wire, because it's one of those small, 100 amps or less, I got 6 degrees in the column, so what's the 6 degree column value for number 8? 40. So then that becomes the lower number between these two, and 40 amps then becomes the answer because I can't exceed the 60 degree column. Even though my math was higher, doesn't matter, that wire without knowing what the terminal's rated for, that terminal rating then becomes the lower value. At the end of every calculation, you always have to go back and check the 75 or the 60, depending on which one you end up, be required to be under. You have to make sure that you look at that value and balance it out, okay?
So if it doesn't say the terminal, you go directly to 60.
Yeah, we're correct.
So on the
Correct,
terminal.
yeah. Now remember, we're just talking about wire that's 14 gauge to number 1, basically anything smaller than 1, or 100 amps or less. This number 8 I'm using is a good example because it's definitely one of those conductors. If we're doing a feeder, I'm using 75 degree column all day long, and 60 degree never has to be, be in my rear view mirror, but it's still have to check the feeder to the 75 degree column. But all right. Does everybody understand what we just did with all those examples? Does it help me make it a little bit more clear? A maximum capacity of an XHHW when installed in a wet location along with 3 other current conductors and ambient temperature 105 would be what? This is, again, you gotta be careful because this wire right here is rated for 90 degrees in a dry or damp location, but in a wet location, it's one of those dual rated conductors. Which means that when I'm asking myself those 3 questions, that third question was a, oops. So it's not a 90 degree rated conductor because that third question that I ask myself every time, that I'm asking you to ask yourself every time, when I saw that XHHW and I recognized that as one of those wires that's dual rated and I'm putting it in a wet location, it automatically becomes a 75 degree maximum insulation and disqualifies it from using 90 degree.
Why they got over in the 90 degree?
Because in a dry location or damp location, I'm allowed to use a 90 degree rating because that's what it's rated for. But in a wet location, if I choose to use it that way, it automatically dumps it to a 75 degree maximum rated insulation with it in a wet location.
So then when to get that amperage, do you go down directly to the 75-degree
I'm gonna start with the 75-degree, value port, right?
average? Okay.
And so I'd end up with, instead of 55 amps, because of that wet location and that XHW being one of those that we have to worry about,
You start at 50.
I'm gonna now be at 50 amps as a starting point under the 75 degrees Celsius. And then this becomes my starting point. Now when I get my derating factor, guess what? The derating factor is gonna be even worse than this one was. Same temperature, right? It's 105 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's the same as we did the other one on 182. So we got another 5%, right? Derating. So we started with 5 amps less, and we had a bigger derating factor to boot. You can see why that 9-degree column is nice if you can use it, because this is certainly going to give us a much smaller conductor. So now if I start with 50 amps at 82%, what do you get math-wise? 41? Well, still not enough, right? But 41 amps even? I'd still end up bumping it down to 40 amps if that's what I have. Again, because I don't know, there's no terminal rating listed up here, so. Now, if this was 4 current carrier conductors, if that other one was also current carrier conductor, then we'd have another step, and then we might be there, but that's enough for that. So again, I'm gonna beat this in your head until you get it. These 3 questions you should ask yourself every freaking time. Now, I've got these 2 in reverse order from what you have on your notes, because I feel like the way I've got them on that is better. However, that's the 3 questions that are critical, and if you'll ask yourself that every time, I think you'll find the correct answer more often than if you just try to remember it however you remember it, right? And I'm not kidding, I still use those 3 every time I do any kind of a wire ampacity. The first thing I'm asking myself is this insulation ever 90? And if it's no, well then bam, I'm start with 75, right? And that's why I don't want to start with 75, I can help it, because that is a much faster way to derate it if you think about it. It's a much deeper cut. So the 9-degree really gives you a better standing so that the math doesn't quite beat you up as bad. You could probably stay in the 75-degree column with most of your installs with that.
So make sure it's right. XHHW.
So the XHHW, the HH means it's high heat rated, right?
High heat rated, then the window is wet. But you won't go automatically start with a 90-degree column with that?
No, if it's in a wet location, it automatically becomes a maximum of 75 degrees. Yeah. It derates it basically on its own is what happens. Now an XHHW-2, the -2 gives me 90 wet or dry.
Right. But then put them over in the column of the 90.
Well, if it's in both.
But they should have master code saying dry location, huh?
Well, I mean, so basically if it's in both the 90 and the 75, all of those that repeat themselves are the same, they're dual rated, and and they all have a W suffix on them except for, yeah, I think they all have W, don't they? All 3 of them?
Well, XHH, this XH is, H is in there too.
Yeah, THHW, XHHW, and then that XHWN, which is a new type that it's in both columns.
But when they use XHHW-2, that's good for 90.
Correct.
They shouldn't even have XHHW in that column.
In the 9-degree column? Well, no.
I mean, that's just for what they're.
What if I'm using it inside a building where it's drier down?
Well, then, that's why I said it should have an asterisk for dry location.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's like,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's a fair comment. And it might even be helpful to suggest that to the NFPA, because I mean, that makes sense, because that would give you an indicator, rather than me have to artificially write it above it every time. I see what you're saying, yeah.
or maybe just put it.
Thanks, that's a good idea.
XHHW-2 covers that.
Talk to me after class, because that's a valid point to raise, and we'll submit it to the NFPA as a proposal, okay? I like that. So that's actually pretty smart. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so ask yourself, is it rated for 9 degrees? Do I have derating factors, which are either ambient temperature or number of current conductors? And finally, if it is one of the dual rated, is it a wet location or dry location? All right, let's do an example. Let's say that I had a number 10 THWN. Go into page 161. A THWN is only rated for 75 degrees, right? So the maximum I could start with for anything to do with that wire is going to be the 75-degree column right off the bat. So it is rated for 35 amps in the 75-degree column, correct?
Yeah.
All right, now granted it's number 10 and we used to put a 30 amp breaker on it, but the ampacity of that conductor is actually 35 amps, right? Now, if I had 112 degrees Fahrenheit of an ambient temperature, what would be the derating factor from page 159? back of page, 112 degrees Fahrenheit would be what you'd use on that very last column and work your way backwards. Remember, we're going to the middle column over there because this is a 75 degree rated value, right? So on page 159, I'm gonna use the last column to find the ambient temperature of 112 degrees. And then I'm gonna use the 75 degrees Celsius column to multiply against the 35 amps. So what is that? What did 112 would be? 82%. So you take the 35 times 0.82 and get. And then if I had 4 current carrying conductors, no, eight is what I have as an example. If I had 8 current carrying conductors in the same raceway, or bundled together without maintaining spacing for links greater than 24 inches, which is the other way to call this into play. 8 conductors that carry current on page 160, the table over there, 8 current carrying conductors is at 80% or 70%? 70%. So I'm gonna do 82% for the ambient temperature. I'm gonna do 70% for the number of current carrying conductors. That give me the 28.7 from here. At 70% would be a total of 20 amps. Wow. That's 8 number 10s in a pipe with 112 degrees Fahrenheit. That is pretty hot, but still. I went from 35 amps to 20. There you go. And then of course you're gonna put a 20 amp breaker on number 10 wire and the inspector's gonna come back and, what are you doing with that? That's not what you're doing. You're gonna do something different. You can't ever put a 20 amp breaker on a number 10 wire. That's the bad part about this whole thing, is that all of this is meant to try to protect that wire at its maximum value, right? But the problem is that people don't understand it really very much at all, and so what'll happen is that you'll put a 20 amp breaker on that number 10 wire, and they'll keep tripping, because everybody forgot that on the calculated value that you used to calculate that wire, and you needed a 30 amp breaker on the number 10, right? You with me? But now, because the ampacity, the derating, you end up having to put it on a 20 amp breaker, it's probably gonna trip. Anyway, somebody's gonna come back over it later after you're done, years later, and they're gonna pull out that 20 amp breaker and put a 30 amp breaker in there, and that's what the inspector will really have a problem with. So I've had them basically come up with every idea you can imagine, anything from a junction box above the panel where you're bringing in a small jumper that's actually sized at a number 12 so that nobody gets confused. Even that's an expense that's crazy, and it doesn't really do what we're trying to accomplish anyway. But I'm not saying it's a perfect system, but this is the way you're supposed to calculate them, and that is effectively the correct step. So you put a 20 amp breaker in there and then put maybe a notice in the panel, so don't you dare ever change it or put anything more than a number, more than a 20 amp breaker in there. But, all right. A 4-aught KC milk conductor, THW, raceway with 3 other same size current carrying conductors and ambient temperature 98 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a really common setup. It's a pretty good example. The 98 degrees Fahrenheit is fair. The 4-aught, good size. There's 3 of them. Actually, there's 4 wires in that raceway. Now this says 3 other of the same size current carrying conductors. The way that's worded, that would make me think that all 4 of those were current carrying conductors. So let's work this out.
So that one you can't go with the 90 degrees, right? Because
Why?
THW's only 2 to
There you go,
75.
right off the bat. The first question you ask yourself is, a wire insulation rated for 90 degrees? No. So you're automatically starting with 75 degree column for a 4-aughts, good for what, 97?
230?
230 amps, and that's what our starting point's gonna be, 230. So or 4-aught, THW, rated for heat is 75 degrees Celsius. And we're gonna then have a 300, what'd you say? Not 300, what was it? 230. 230 amps on the 700 column, and then we're gonna take the ambient temperature of 98 degrees, page 159, under the 75 degree column,
0.88.
88% times 0.88. 230 times 0.88 is gonna give me, thank you. I always do that. I would leave my calculator over there so that I can just kind of walk over there and y'all give me the answer. What did you say it was?
2.4.
Thank you. Now I'm just gonna leave it just like that. I'm not done yet, so just go ahead and then go to page 160. 4 current carrying conductors would be that first row there on the table. That would give me an 80% additional derating step based on the fact that this one plus these are worded in a manner that they're basically the same conductors. So we're gonna take an 80% derating factor against that. 202.4 times 0.8,
161.92.
161?
Yeah.
Wow. 61.92. If I had a circuit, or let's say those were feeders or something, if I had a load that was 175 amps, that wire wouldn't cut it, would it? So I've got 161.92. Now, remember the rule with the breaker sizing, right? The rule with the breaker sizing says that 800 amps or smaller, I'm allowed to do what? Round up to the next standard size overcurrent device, right? So technically, in the field, if I had that number right there and I had a 175 amp load, could I still use that wire? The answer is going to be no. I'd be allowed to round the breaker up to 175 amps, right? But the wire ampacity would still not be enough to do that. So yes, you could put a 175 amp breaker on a 161 amp wire, because that's the way you would round it up, and you put a larger breaker over it, didn't know what the wire is rated for. But you can't undersize the conductors for a load that's more than what they're rated for. So if I had a 161 amp ampacity for that conductor, but I had a load that was higher than that, or like let's say the load was 175 amps, I couldn't use that wire. Even though I could put a 175 amp breaker on that wire, the wire itself is still on rated for 161, and if my load is higher than that, I'm gonna have to replace the wire. Make sense?
Keep the breaker.
Huh?
But keep the breaker.
I'd keep the breaker unless I go with a wire that's got a bigger breaker rating, and I'd put a bigger breaker on there, because I'm gonna be perfectly safe with a bigger breaker with a bigger wire, because that's what it's rated for, right? People get that confused right there, because they're gonna say that 161, and I know I put 175 amps on that, and I get that. I've had more than one or two arguments with somebody over a 500 kc mill and what's 500 kc mill, like 380 or something like that? 385? So you want to put a 400 amp breaker on a 500 kc mill, and I get that, right? No problem, because you can round that up. But not if your load is rated for more than 380 amps, right? My load's rated for 390 amps. In other words, I got 390 amps worth of draw on that. If I put a 500 kc mill conductor on that, it's not going to be rated for enough for whatever that, for that load. Really what happens is the derated value is what we're talking about. But anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. That's for residential. Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. Yeah, that's kind of.
That's a different animal.
Yeah, it is.
I don't like it.
This one is basically a similar question to 250, the THHW, 3 exact same conductors, ambient temperature, and a dry location. This one would be based on a 9-degree rating of this conductor, because I've got derating factors to take into account, but it's in a dry or damp location, so I'm okay with that being a 9-degree rated conductor, right?
Yeah.
We're not gonna work it because we need to kind of move on, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. This one in a wet location would not be a 9-degree rated conductor to start with. It would be a 75 because it's in a wet location. Okay? Rooftops. There used to be this crazy table that was based off of the distance away from the rooftop, and there's all these different levels, and there's a ½ inch and above a ½ inch and below a 3/4 inch, and there's 40 degrees added for that. It was just stupid. It was so bizarre that there were 2 or 3 questions that, I mean, it was just so easy to get wrong because the way it was worded was horrible. They got rid of it. The copper industry, the wire industry got together. They built this apparatus with all this wire everywhere that was at different heights above roof, and they proved to the NFPA that table was a bunch of bunk. And so they got rid of it, except for one value. And so if you look on conductors above rooftop, and it is on page 158. Now it says in because it is kind of a new section, but it's not really at all. But number 2, rooftop. I'm on the right hand side of page 158 where it says in to rooftop. Basically, as long as I have a height above the roof to the bottom of the pipe or whatever I've got the wire in, from the bottom of that to the top of the roof, as long as that's above 7/8 of an inch, I don't have to worry about the ambient temperature. But if I put that sucker anything lower than that, that's going to hit me with a 60-degree Fahrenheit adder to my ambient temperature. So for example, the one we had a minute ago, well, this one right here, it's 106. If I put this at a ½ inch, right, that's lower than that 7/8 zone. That means that it's close enough to that radiant heat surface of that membrane radiating the heat off the building. That's going to make that 166 degrees Fahrenheit, not 106.
I don't know how you mount it any closer with a 1-hole strap.
Lay it directly on the top.
You gotta use 7/8.
I mean, come on now, I've seen that PVC roll waving across it, but, you know, directly on top there.
Do you remember that calculation
Liquid now.
table they had for that?
That's what I'm saying, it was crazy, it was bizarre. And you'd end up with these crazy, yeah, it was a little bit too much. This makes sense though, if you put it directly on the roof, you really are gonna heat that wire up a lot more, because the modern TPO on a building is meant to reflect heat off the building surface, and if you got something directly on that reflect, it's radiant heat is what it is, or convection heat, I guess. I know it's radiant heat. The half an inch in this case is not good enough. Kindorf, the thin is like 7/8, isn't it?
166.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, 7/8.
There you
That's why
go.
I said you
Then-
can't go any middle
Okay,
of that.
see,
But that's just,
Higher.
well, yeah, exactly. Well, unless you lay it directly on the roof.
This right here is like.
Yeah, but before this rule came out, there's a lot of stuff laying directly on top of the roof, and there was a lot of PVC that, you know, that's kinda what they were worried about trying to, but that's really.
That's why they started engineering, they got plumb blocks with the.
Oh, yeah, it gets,
plumbed into it.
those are expensive too.
Got a question.
Yes,
Right here on the exception, it says, XHHW two insulators should not be subject to ampacity adjustment.
and that's absolutely correct.
So is that?
On the
applied to-
test, I would ignore that.
Okay.
But
They tell you,
the reality of it is you're absolutely right. I mean, but we're talking about the 6-degree Fahrenheit, right? We're not talking about not subjected to any derating factor. So it still would have 106 degrees Fahrenheit applied to it. And you could lay it on the roof and you wouldn't have to worry, but I'd still have to apply the 106 to it, whatever that number is. So it doesn't exempt it from all of the derating factors, just from the 6-degree adder. Okay. Alrighty, what do you do if you have a residential house and you have a service to build a building, a service on that? If I were to do a residential dwelling that was 200 amp service, and I come over here to this table over here on page 161, and I go to 200 amp wire, I'd run a 3/0 to that, the 3/0 copper to that 200 amp service. That's the same thing as we do for commercial. Well, but I have another table that I used to have in the code book that said, look, I can do a 2-watt for a 200 amp service. Right? It only says 175 here, but residential dwellings are not quite the intensity of a demand load, right? So, you know, we can get away with a smaller wire within than what we could in a commercial building. They took that table away from us in the 2014 book. It caused 3 years of concern across the entire industry because nobody really understood what it meant. The 2017 edition put it back in the annex, way back on page 800, where it kind of buried it, but at least it was there. Thank God they brought it back on page 157. It's got a different, it used to be 310.7, now it's 310.12, is it? 12A. 12. Page 157, and there you go. A 200 amp service for residential dwelling would run a 2-watt, right? So it's basically one size smaller than what a commercial equivalent would be, but however, what my point is, remember that if you're talking about residential feeders, make sure you're using this table and not the page 161 to try to size the feeders for that service. All right, let's take a break because we've got ranges next. I love ranges. Woohoo! Excited.
ranges,
Oh, because the table, yeah, no, but I mean, that was stupid too, because if you take that 83% that's right there, against any standard overcurrent device, there's only X amount of wire that you could do, and that's exactly what the table was built for. Take about 10 minutes. What time is it? Yeah, she's gonna give us some tips, I think. So.
No pizza this week.
Never mind. You can set it, you can draw a picture of the pizza on the,
Okay, I do have one question.
alright.
So when we're talking about, when they brought that one wire in down to 20 amp rate on a branch circuit, you can go full 20 amps for 20 amps?
So that,
Or you don't have to do 125% rule, so that's just for the line side of the.
no, you know, so what you're talking about is that a breaker, most smaller breakers are not rated for continuous duty. So if I have continuous duty loads, I either take an 80% derated on the breaker, or I put 125% on the load, one way or the other. I mean, it's the same issue. But if you've already calculated that into your load value, then whatever that 20 amp is, you put 20 amps.
As a rule of thumb, anything, anywhere I put on breaker, I always do 125% of the rating of the breaker.
Of the rating of the load.
Like
80% of the breaker to bring it down.
We only load up a breaker at 80% as a common
Right.
practice.
Right.
But I would always have my wire 125% of the rated breaker.
Oh.
Says a little thumb, because it's, I know some kids, but,
You can do that, I mean, but it's not, yeah, it's not a code requirement, but,
like I said, this is all bare minimum, what they.
absolutely, yeah.
But I always take that one step, but Nagadoches and Lufkin, they don't allow no 14 in the house. Not even for the LED lighting, not even for the smoke, the smoke detector.
That's the way City of Austin was forever, and I hate it, I hate 14 gauge wire, but, I mean, all the LED lighting now,
But for them
it's
little,
fine.
for them little nice, self-contained, junction, canvas, LED lights, where you just cut a little 4-inch hole and
Oh,
just
yeah.
have clips.
Yeah, yeah.
Try to put you a feed in and plug and a feed out plug in there.
Oh, yeah, but they-
14 is where you wanna go with it.
I bought one of those at an auction. I'd never seen one before. I bought an auction. I'm like, what the heck is this? What are you supposed to do with it? And I realized that was UL listed, or just popping it in there and you can.
You got a little knockout,
Yeah.
you pop a little plastic, a Romex connector in there.
I haven't ever installed it though, cause it's, the opening has to be almost exactly right, cause it's not much of a clip on the one that I got.
Oh, depending on what brand you get. You get a knockoff brand, somebody just tried to jump in the market, and they just trim quarter what you could, cause you have to be very
Yeah.
meticulous, cause you don't have it like an 8-inch or.
That trim, that's
But then you
what
get a
I'm
good one, you take a 4-inch hole, it's gonna be 6 inches, it's gonna cover.
I got you. I like those ones that just, pop into a old 6-inch can.
Just
Have not-
screw it into the pigtail,
Mhm.
just snap it in.
Mhm.
But they kinda got away from those because they've got some cameras out there, but. All you do is, all you do is bring your wire and a little circle right there, and then just mark on your print where you go at. That way, when you just cut a hole where you need it to.
That's just fancy, man. That's decent.
says 4 minutes away.